Everyone, please rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Welcome, everyone. Township of Old Bridge Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting, June 1st, 2023. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, the agenda of this meeting. Also by mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune, filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk, and posting the agenda on the municipal website. Ms. C, can we have a roll call, please?
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Stoner? Here. Ms. Chevalier is absent. Mr. Scogno?
Here.
Ms. Andrews?
Here.
Ms. Tesaverdi is absent. Mr. Izzo?
Here.
Mr. Dasty?
Here.
Mr. Dargy?
Present.
Ms. Sawan?
Here.
And myself, Ms. C. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For housekeeping issues, if you have a phone on you, please silence it at this time so you don't disturb those that may be testifying before the board this evening. The meeting is televised on the local cable TV, Channel 15 here in the community. That will go off when we end. And by the way, we do end the meetings at 10:30. So for the attorneys present, should we be going into that last half hour, please realize that I still have to do a public portion before we end at 10:30. Let's hope we don't have to, but it does look like we have a little bit of work. If you're going to testify before the board this evening, the board attorney will swear you in, and I'm actually referring to the public at this point. The public portion is taken at the end of each matter, not at the end of each witness. So one matter might have 5 witnesses, so keep in mind what your questions may be, and there will be a public portion, of course, at the end of each one. All right, having said that, we're going to move the application as it is written on the agenda if you've taken one. Tonight, we have 2 applications for housekeeping issues. The first one is 14-2023Z, Sabrina Gaudio Finn. Mr. Dasty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This matter was heard at the last. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This matter was heard at the last board meeting. It's an application for bulk variance relief for a accessory pole barn. The board granted the variance relief, finding that it was a hardship existed. It was a uniquely shaped lot. It is a 1,900 square foot pole barn.
Feedback.
Oh, sorry. Where the 600 square feet is required, and the height of the pole barn was 18.6 feet, where 15 feet are required. So that is the resolution memorializing the approval at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dasty. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone want to move for adoption?
Connor, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Izzo?
Mr. Stoner, I heard first. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Mr. Izzo?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. The second one, second resolution will be 24-2023Z. Jennifer Daniele Del Duca, I should say. Mr. Dasty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another bulk variance matter that was granted at the last meeting in May. The applicant received a bulk variance relief for a existing fence in the front yard. The height of the fence is 6 feet, where 4 feet is the maximum permitted by ordinance. And also that the applicant received a variance for an existing deck in the rear of the home, the side yard setback of 6.5 feet, where the minimum is 11 feet. And the board found at the hearing, given the testimony provided that a hardship exists and satisfied the requirements of the municipal land use law. And that is the resolution before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Dasty. Board members, you've heard it, the resolution.
Motion to approve, Scogno.
Is there a second?
Izzo second?
Is there a second? Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Mr. Scogno?
Yes.
Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Mr. Izzo?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Thank you, board members. We're going to move on to item 3 is the applications. We'll start with this continuance on both of these. I guess I'm going to read them both in, Mr. Dasty, at the same time, as they were kind of wrapped up in one package?
They were wrapped up, Mr. Chairman. They were identical applications, and the applicant testified at the last hearing that they would incorporate by reference the testimony from 57-2022Z into 58-2022Z.
Okay. Counsel, is that okay with you? We're going to read them in both, right?
Yes.
All right, as per our counsel, 57-2022Z, that's Vassal Centipal, Block 13005, Lot 55, location, physical location is 119 Wesley Road for a new single-family home. In addition, 58-2022Z, Olesa Centipal, Block 13005, Lot 56 at 123 Wesley Road, also for a new single-family home. Peter Klauser of Highland Paper representing, sir.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, professional staff, members of the public. For the record, Peter Klauser with the firm Halbram Pape on behalf of the applicants. These are two separate applicants, or two separate applications. They were presented in full at the board's, probably not your last meeting, but last month. Jared Pape, my partner, presented them. The first application was presented with all of its witnesses and description, and then, as was mentioned by Mr. Dosty, the second application was incorporated by reference. The board only had 5 members to hear the applications. These require use variance relief. So we carried to this hearing date. That was the next available hearing date. Just by way of recollection, these are 2 single-family homes on very long lots located in the ER zone. The 2 homes are construction and situated essentially identically. That's evidenced by your professionals' reports, which were almost identical. So the applications were open to the public, closed, and we're here for a vote this evening. Just a couple of things to remind the board. The single-family homes obviously were not permitted in the ER zone, nor were there any bulk standards in the ER zone. But based on recommendations from your staff, specifically Vina, we looked at the R20 zone standards, that both of the houses comply to those, the lots comply to those. And Vina even pointed out in her, I read the transcripts, pointed out in the hearings that the ordinance may be a little bit flawed in this area, and it's something she's working on maybe correcting. And if those corrections did come through, the applicants may not even be before these boards. And then Jim had pointed out what some of the permitted uses were, and they didn't really make a lot of sense for this lot. So now that we have a 6-member board, we have at least another voting member. We would ask that the board act favorably on the applications. These are single-family homes in an area where there are single-family homes, and the testimony, I think, was clear that these are pretty consistent with what's in the neighborhood, and that these will be good caretakers of that environmentally sensitive area, as opposed to potential commercial uses which may be permitted. So I think there's 2 separate votes, I would think.
What my question was going to be, the 2 separate votes.
Vote for each application, yes, correct. So you can take 57-2022.
We'll take them in the order, yeah, that they're on the.
And Mr. Izzo, that's on the board, has read the transcript, and he signed a certification here.
Thank you.
What I don't have is, I know it's a D1, but Vina, there's bulks associated with this, is there not? I don't have that in front of me. The Centipal.
There are not bulks because it's not a permitted use in the zone, and there's no.
Yeah,
bulk.
this is the unique nature of a use variance. There really is no bulk standards.
Right,
They're
okay.
subsumed in it, but we all looked at the R20 because it seemed to make the most sense, and there were no deviations from the R20 zone.
So you're simply voting on the use, right?
That's all we need.
Let me see if anybody has any questions before we go to a vote, okay?
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Klauser on this matter? To my left, none? And to my right? None. All right, then you've heard, you sat for this. We're going to take the first one, 57-2022Z. That's block 13005, lot 55 for a new single-family home. This is requiring a D1 use variance. Someone interested in moving that?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second for the use variance?
Izzo, second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. Izzo,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. The second one involved is 58-2022Z. Once again, that's block 13005, lot 56, 123 Wesley Road for a new single-family home. Someone interested in moving a D1 use variance?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second, Stoner?
There you go.
Mr. Stoner seconds. Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes.
Ms. Andrews,
Yes.
Mr. Izzo?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Glauser, thank you, and thank Mr. Pape for the presentation.
Thank you. See you later.
All right, we'll move on, 02-2023Z, this is also continuance. Mohanad Habash, it's the EDO1 zone, block 10, lot 316. Physical location is 301 Route 35 for a billiards hall. Major preliminary and final site plan with D variance. Lawrence B. Sachs, representing the applicant. Mr.
Yes,
Sachs.
good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, board professionals. Lawrence Sachs on behalf of the applicant, Mohanad Habash. We were here, I guess, on May 4th, and had a similar situation that you only had 5 board members that evening. So we deferred a vote based upon that. Mr. Chairman, I just want to just briefly maybe just sum up, and then I'll request that a vote be taken.
By all means.
Thank you. You know, as the board is aware, this property is located in the EDO zone, and having reviewed the transcript, I know that Ms. Sawant gave an explanation of what the Economic Development Opportunity Zone is all about. She also opined that, frankly, this is a use that probably should have been included in the EDO zone. It's a recreational use, but for some reason it's been omitted, and that there will be a master plan reexamination in the future to obviously deal with this issue, amongst other issues, I'm sure, in the EDO zone. But that's set forth in the transcript. Now, I just want to cite what the purpose of the EDO zone is, and it says that the purpose of the EDO 1 zone, areas having a 1 acre minimum lot size, is to permit on a small scale a mix of office, retail, and light industrial uses to allow the Old Bridge Township to attain the goals of accommodating market forces, increasing local rateable base, expanding the local and regional jobs base, providing a more diverse mix of goods and services to residents and businesses within the municipality and region, achieving an improved balance of residential and non-residential development within the municipality, and utilizing suitable land for development in a more efficient, functional, and aesthetic manner while controlling and managing highway access. If I look at every element of the EDO zone, and I believe my planner, Mr. Lieber, who's not here this evening, but provided some very ample testimony, this particular application satisfies every one of those goals. This is Lawrence Harbor. We have a mix of residential and non-residential. We're looking to expand the economic base. And I think more importantly, you heard from the landlord of this property, who also is not here this evening, but he indicated that he's had difficulty in attracting tenants into this particular shopping center. The former tenant that was there was a furniture store. Unfortunately, it's a failed furniture store. It's got the largest square footage in that shopping center, and we essentially now have a vacant storefront in a shopping center that hopefully should be thriving in the future. Just going back to the omission of this particular use in the EDO zone, if in fact it was a permitted use, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been here last month. I wouldn't be here tonight. I would have been in front of the planning board. I would have only been seeking a parking variance. And let me just talk about the testimony from Mr. Lieber. Mr. Lieber provided not only engineering testimony, but planning testimony. And again, the bulk variance relief that we're seeking is for parking. He provided testimony that he actually did a threefold analysis of the parking at this parking lot. He looked at the ITE data, the Institute of Traffic Engineers. He looked at your local ordinance. And then he actually did field data. He actually went out and took parking counts. And under all 3 scenarios, he determined that parking was more than adequate. And in fact, when the peak hours of operation of this business, which really is in the evening, the other uses are shut down. So there's more than sufficient parking, and that was his testimony on the record. We are not serving any alcohol. I know there were some comments made by a board member that, well, it's not a suitable use. But again, we have probably a lot of unsuitable uses surrounding this property. For example, there's a go-go bar across the street. There are other types of uses that are along Route 35. This is a wholesome use. This is a family use. This is a use, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you even spoke about it. Not everybody works 9 to 5. There are hospital workers. There are members of law enforcement. There are members who work for fire departments who probably would enjoy playing pool in an off hour, maybe when I might not go or some of you board members might not go, but that's not the criteria to decide whether a use is suitable. I also had an opportunity to speak to your police department because I was concerned, maybe I missed something, but I noticed that there was no report from your public safety division about any concerns about this particular use. And in fact, they welcome having something in this shopping center. There are various studies that have been engaged by Rutgers University in 2020 and 2022 that talk about the harm of having vacant storefronts versus a use. It's the old broken windows syndrome that we heard, I think it was Commissioner Bratton in New York back in the 1990s and 2000s. We can't have vacant storefronts. We need to have uses. We need to have thriving business uses in certain areas, and certainly I think this is one of them that provides that. There are other pool halls that are operating in Old Bridge, particularly in bars. They don't have any hours of restriction. I'm going to talk about hours of restriction because we're willing to provide those limitations on some of the hours because I heard some of the board members talk about that. But to compare a pool hall to an unsavory activity is probably something that comes from the 1950s when we had the Music Man. I think I even referenced that. And the Music Man was interesting because you had somebody who tried to put pool halls out of business who was a huckster. He wanted to sell band uniforms, i.e. the Music Man. So, you could make the same analogy that maybe a bowling alley, which is open late at night, might attract unsavory elements. And I don't think anybody on that board would suggest that. So I don't think to suggest that a billiards facility or a pool facility in the year 2023 is going to attract that activity. Let me just talk about the hours of restriction. There was some comments that maybe we don't need to be open as late on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, even maybe Sunday night. We're willing to agree to that. I think originally we said we wanted to be open till 2 a.m., but we'll offer that as a concession to the municipality that we can close earlier. My suggestion is maybe 12 o'clock, midnight, or maybe even at 1 a.m. But certainly on Friday and Saturday nights, which Mr. Lieber testified would be our busiest nights, we'd like to stay open till 2 a.m. I'm not going at 2 a.m. to play pool, and maybe some of you are not, but that doesn't mean that that's not a use that would attract people who would want to play pool at that evening. And in fact, I think, Mr. Chairman, you amply indicated that. So with all that said, this board has approved other uses which we may not have perceived as being mainstream uses in the past. I remember this board approving a tattoo parlor. Now, again, back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, tattoo parlors were not what we'd consider mainstream uses. Now they are. Now, personally, I would not go to a tattoo parlor. I would not get a tattoo. First of all, it's contrary to my religious beliefs, all right? But that doesn't mean that someone else should not have that opportunity to do so. So with that said, Mr. Chairman, I think we went to the public last time. I don't think there were any members of the public who had any concerns about this. I know you have an additional member here tonight. I would make a request that you poll the board again because I want to make sure you don't have a full board here with 7 members. I just want to see if anybody has any issues with this application.
Okay. Let me just check with Mr. Dasty. There's been no new testimony except an offer. Do I need to reopen a public
No, it
portion?
was just a closing argument, summation, and polling the board if the chair feels is
Okay.
completely appropriate.
Well, let's just see what the board, if the board hasn't, perhaps Mr. Sachs, the board may have some questions.
Absolutely.
And I'll start on my left.
One question. 2 a.m., let's say that's not a problem. How is your lighting in the parking lot, in the front of your building?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Izzo, I think at the last meeting, there was testimony about the lights. So the parking lot is lit at night.
Okay.
Yeah. Obviously, it's even lit even all night as far as I know because,
all right.
so it's,
Unaware.
all right. But certainly if that was an issue in terms of shielding any lighting, I'm sure the landlord could consider doing that. But I think the lighting is actually a benefit. If we don't have lights in this parking lot, you're going to have criminal activity.
Correct.
And that's the problem, so.
This is a strip mall.
Right.
Okay, so
But UPS, if everybody shuts down at 10, let's say, he wants to stay open another 4
I
hours.
don't think they change, but
Yeah, I mean, the interior lights in UPS are probably out, but the parking lights are on.
Okay, perfect.
The lights that are underneath any walkways would still be on.
That'll satisfy people walking around.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay.
anything, Mr. Scogno?
No, thank you.
Mr. Stoner?
Hi, Larry. How you doing today?
Good, Ben, how you doing?
One thing you had mentioned was the police department. I guess can you kind of elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah,
on
well,
that?
generally, you would have a report. If the police department had any issues with respect to an application, they would issue a report or have some comment. They didn't do it here. So they obviously had no concerns.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cotter?
I am comfortable with the testimony presented and the application. Sorry about that. I'm comfortable with the testimony presented and the application in general. I'm not, I don't think I need to see any restrictions on this, personally.
Ms. Andrews?
I have no concerns, other than I do hope they won't be bringing in alcohol. I know you're not going to serve it, but that no one can bring it in.
Yes, and we'll stipulate, Ms. Andrews, that no alcohol will be served, and I can make a further stipulation. And maybe it's because I had teenage children coming to my house on occasion with water bottles. And maybe something was filled in there. I think what we could also put, we could have signage up that you're not to bring any beverage into the facility. If you want to purchase a beverage, I think we indicated we'll sell water and soft drinks.
Yes, I have no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and finally, from myself, I don't see a reason for a restriction. If I can go play pool at a bar here in town till 2 a.m., why can't I go to a billiard hall? I think it's a little unfair. The bar across the street, although it's not a bar, I don't believe they have a liquor license in the place that you mentioned, but I believe they're open till 2 a.m. So I'm comfortable with the situation. The last thing I personally want to see is any blight. And when you start losing stores in malls, all of a sudden you're going to find blight on that 35 corridor. And that's the last thing we need. And not only there, but anywhere. Closed stores are no good for the economy. They're no good for people, and it does draw those that may want to kind of hang out and do bad things. So I have no problem with it either. All right, having said that, Mr. Sachs, you want me to call for a vote here?
I believe so, Mr.
Okay, this is,
Mr. Chairman, I just have
okay,
one,
sorry.
I beg your pardon. There was, speaking of Vina, there was a testimony, I guess, at the last hearing that there's going to be a security system on site, or you'll,
Yes. There will be a security system.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
So it's going to be a D1 use for the change of the use within the mall, and then there'll be, is there bulk?
Yeah, there's a
let's see.
parking variance.
Parking, right?
Yep, and then a preliminary.
Preliminary and final. All right, as to changing the use, it was a furniture store. They want to put in a billiards hall. Someone comfortable with moving that D1?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Izzo?
Ms. Andrews, seconds, roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
Yes,
Miss Andrews,
Yes,
Mr. Izzo,
Yes?
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Now, as to the bulk for the parking, someone move that?
I'll move it, Stoner.
Is there a second?
Izzo?
Mr. Rizzo, seconds, roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Miss Andrews,
yes,
Mr. Izzo,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. As to
Preliminary and final site plan.
major preliminary, someone move that?
Connor, I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second, Stoner.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
yes,
Mr. Scogno,
yes,
Miss Andrews,
yes,
Mr. Izzo,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes, final site plan. Someone move that?
I'll move it, Stoner.
Is there a second?
Connor, second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Stoner,
Yes.
Mr. Scogno,
yes.
Miss Andrews,
yes.
Mr. Izzo,
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan.
Yes. Mr. Sachs, thank you and your professionals that had come in, and I wish the owner luck because we do need to populate stores.
Yes, and thank you, members of the board. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Have a good evening, sir. All right, we're reaching 8, so we're gonna cut the baby in half here, I believe, Ms. Sawant. We're gonna give each 1 hour, unless the first one happens to be less, the second one can take that time. Because by 10, we're gonna have to go to public portion, so if that's, Mr. Dasty?
Yes, sir.
That's okay?
That's fine.
We're going to assign an hour each. We're going to call them in order. 50-2021Z OBNJ LLC. This is in the EDO 1 zone, block 1069, Lot 1, location 69, Highway 35, for an apartment addition. Mr.
evening.
Alfieri,
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Dante Alfieri on behalf of the applicant.
how are you, sir?
Good, yourself?
Good. This is going to require major preliminary and final site plan with C&D variance. Sir?
Yes. So we are here seeking preliminary major site plan with related variances. The property is located at Block 1069, Lot 1. I have 4 individuals to provide testimony tonight. I have an engineer, I have an architect, traffic, and a planner. We are here seeking to construct a addition to the first floor and second floor. This is a existing structure with a mixed use. There is commercial on the first floor, and then there are existing 8 residential apartments on the second floor. We're expanding the first floor for additional commercial, and we are expanding the second floor for additional residential. So without further ado, I'll have our engineer come up so she can describe the site. Very good. Hey, Jackie, how are you? Good. Whatever you want.
Yeah, we'll swear you. You just need to hit that button there so it's green. There you go. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board?
Yes, I do.
And can we have your name, ma'am?
Jacqueline J. Floor.
Thank you.
Ms. Flor, could you please provide your qualifications for the board?
Sure. My name's Jacqueline Floor. I'm the president and CEO of Ingenuity Infrastructure. I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing for 23 years. I started my career basically doing engineering throughout New Jersey. I've testified before multiple boards, including this board. And I can continue if
Thank you.
you'd like.
We'll accept your credentials and your expertise.
So, Ms. Flor, if you could orient the board to the site itself?
Sure. I did provide electronic. Okay. I also have hard boards in case the electronic didn't work. So let's see if the electronic come on. Do they go there?
I have no idea.
I think, Natalie, you're going to, the vice secretary will put that up.
These were all submitted in your application, or are these exhibits we're going to mark?
One exhibit you will mark.
Okay.
So that's in the exhibit, but that's the, let me go to this
Mood lighting, there we go.
one. Make sure you can see it. Okay. All right, so the site is on Route 35. You can see it's number 69, Route 35. It's between Rosewood Drive and Birchwood Drive. The existing site, if you've seen it, already has residential as well as a retail use, if you have seen it, as well as 5 existing parking stalls. What we are proposing is to expand that site, a small addition. You're going to hear from the architect that will walk you through that addition. And we're going to expand this to 13 units, plus we're going to retain the retail, although it's going to be a little bit smaller than what we originally proposed. We did receive a review letter several months ago, and we addressed most of the comments in that letter, so we're back with a revised letter to talk about how we address those items. We do have access to the site from Route 35. It's a one-way access. Sorry, let me pull this closer so you can hear me. It's a one-way access, and we propose a total of 24 parking spaces to serve the site. So if you'd like, I can go through the review letter if that's the easiest way to address the comments.
And the letter is dated June 1st.
Yes. If it's helpful, I brought copies of the letter. I can pass that out if you'd like, although you'd have to mark it. It's up to you.
We have them.
Okay. With our responses. That's okay. All right. So the letter was issued on June 1st, and the first comment just talks about the D1 and the D4 variance. We have a planner here that will respond to that. Item 2 talks about the existing nonconformities. This existing site is 0.49 acres. We can't change that, so it's an existing nonconformity, and the proofs for that will be discussed by the planner. Same thing with the minimum lot width. As you can see, this site has 3 frontages, and because of that, we trigger an existing nonconformity with lot width. Same thing with the front yard setback. This is an existing structure that has an existing front yard setback. There's only an addition in the back. If you look at the exhibit, you can see the area that's in pink. That is the location where the building is expanded. The rest is the existing footprint of the building. So that existing nonconformity of setback is to remain. Same thing with the rear yard setback. You can see that blue building, that's the existing footprint of the building. You will see when the architect testifies that there is a facelift being done to this building, and it's going to look much different than it looks now. That said, we still have that existing nonconformity. Number 3 speaks about the landscape area ratio. With this, we did put in landscaping, additional landscaping. However, we are just slightly below your requirement. Your requirement's 0.4, we're at 0.37, and we didn't try to round. We showed you the exact number. We are at 0.37, so we don't quite meet it. However, we did add additional trees and shrubs, in order to try to beautify the site. And you will hear some proofs on the variances from the planner. Number 4, we initially had come in with 14 units and a more dense 400 square feet of retail. We took the letter very seriously that we got from the planner and from the engineer, and we did go back to the drawing board and come back with 13 units and 292 square feet. And you'll hear about that from the architect. Number 5, there was a RSIS and a request for revised architecturals. You'll hear from the architect on how he revised the architecturals to address the comment. As for the existing nonconformities, that planning testimony will be from the planner. Under waivers, there was initially, it spoke about 1 point of ingress and egress allowed on the tract. There was also in the prior letter various layouts. I don't know if you saw the prior letter, but it showed that previously there was an application previously before the board that had 2 parking lots. We didn't want to do that because it would have increased the impervious substantially. So what we did is propose one-way circulation, which we think is better than what the circulation is now. You would enter the site from Route 35, and you would exit on Rosewood Avenue. Number 2 talks about the location of the driveway. Given the way that the site's laid out, we couldn't correct that, so a waiver is requested for the location of the driveway. Number 3, parking space angle. We are still requesting a design waiver for that. Our angle is the 60-degree angle, and the spaces are the 11 by 18 spaces that does require a design waiver, but it does, in our opinion, meet RSIS, but it does not meet your ordinance. It would require a waiver from your ordinance. We do believe that the spaces are adequately sized. We also have turning templates that I brought with me tonight, that we did provide with the package, and we do believe that there's enough room for cars to back in and out with the one-way circulation. Same thing on number 4. We did, the accessible spaces were revised per the comment, and a design waiver is still requested for that angle. But we did address the request for the 11 feet and the 8 feet and the 5 feet. Number 5 speaks about the one location where we have a 3-foot radius. I'm going to back away from the mic just to show you where that's at. That one radius, we did that to protect that one parking stall. If we were to expand it to wider, it shortened because of trying to round out that radius. It actually shortened that, and I felt that it was better to protect that parking stall than to meet the radius, which is why we left that curb return radius at 3. Number 6 talks about loading and unloading. Given the residential nature and the fact that the one retail use that's there is only 292, we believe that any loading that would occur, they would pull into the driveway in order to load and unload, and it's a one-way, and they would pull back out onto Rosewood Avenue. So a design. As for the residential density comments, the FAR, you're going to hear from the planner on that. I did want to point out, before the planner testifies, I think the letter says .32, it's actually .346. The architect had to slightly modify, very de minimisly, the footprint for the addition in order to accommodate, stairs and other things. So the exact FAR is .346. So you'll be hearing testimony from the planner on the FAR and the affordable housing, which is number 2. The architecture, which is number 3, will be addressed by the architect. As for the remaining engineering comments, number 6 was addressed. Revised architecturals were provided. I don't know if a copy, if maybe you saw them, but if not, I'm going to have the architect testify to the architecturals.
Our office didn't receive any revised
didn't?
architecturals.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll make sure that the architect, when he testifies, addresses that. Number 7 spoke about the sidewalks. We did provide the sidewalk on Rosewood. We did not provide it on Birchwood Drive. It's very, I don't know if you've been to the site, but there's a lot of grade there. It comes up. A retaining wall in order to do that. We felt that it was better. There's no sidewalk on the remainder of the street on that side. So we felt it was better to put trees and leave that landscaping on that side. Number 8, the driveway access, that was addressed. Number 8 already says that it's addressed, so we'll skip over that. Number 9 was asking for testimony regarding the use of the sidewalk to the trash enclosure on Rosewood. The reason we moved that trash enclosure over on Rosewood Drive is it was a previous comment. I can't recall who the comment came from. It might have been the fire marshal, but it was a comment in a prior letter that asked us to take that refuse area and pull it within 20 feet away from the building. They didn't want it right up against the building where we had it before. So for that reason, when we moved it that far out, it just made more sense to give it its own access because there was no easy way to maneuver the truck into it whenever we had to move it 20 feet away from the building. So for that reason, we gave the refuse area its own access, and so we extended the sidewalk up Rosewood Avenue so that they could get there. Previously, we had that refuse area right up close to the building. Number 10 speaks about the letter of no interest. We're going to have a traffic testimony from Lee Klein, so we're going to have him address that comment on Naloni. 11, the length of the accessible parking stall, that says it was satisfactorily addressed. So number 11 is addressed. Number 12 says that it's addressed. 13 talks about the community impact statement, and that was addressed as well. And then it also asks about the revised architectural, so I'm going to have the architect speak about that. Number 14 says that the comment was addressed. 15 says it was addressed. 16 speaks about testimony regarding the trash enclosure pickup and the location. So as I just stated, with the trash enclosure, we moved that to address the comment that it should be 20 feet away from the building. So we moved it out closer and gave it its own access. Number 17 says that it was addressed. 18 says that it was addressed. 19 deferred to the fire marshal. We did get a fire marshal letter dated 5/12 stating that they find the plan conceptually satisfactory at this time. And we could provide a copy of that if needed. The flush curb says that it was addressed, number 20. The existing conditions plans talk about the conditions of the walls. A note should be added to the plan, and then it says it was addressed, so number 21 is addressed. 22 says the comments addressed, so those are all addressed. Number 23, I believe, was addressed, a net decrease, and that we don't, it's more of a statement of fact that we don't trigger the major stormwater development rules. Number 24 says that it was addressed, 25 addressed, 26 says it was addressed, 27 says it was addressed. This is because we went through the letter in detail and made sure we submitted everything upon receiving the planner and the engineer's letter previously. 29 addressed, 30 addressed, 31 asked for parking lot striping provided, including color. It said it was partially addressed. They're just asking that we add additional color information or our plans, and we're willing to comply with that. We have no problem with that comment. And then we also agreed to 32, which asked for a call, some corrections on the detail call-outs. We will do that. We agree to the details can be revised to correct any inconsistencies. And same thing with 33, that we can revise the details to clarify the fence material. The traffic review comments, we have Lee Klein here, so he'll testify regarding the traffic review comments, which are 35, 36, the whole way through, I believe, the traffic comments, 54. Let me just make sure none of those were traffic comments. Yep, I believe, yeah, this gets into the EV. So these will all be addressed by Lee Klein. And in number 44, I already spoke about the loading space, but Lee may also address that. So yes, I think that all of these appear to be for Lee to address. If you need any more information regarding on number 51 with an accessible route, we're happy to provide the grades on the plan. We already testified on 52 regarding the grading challenges on Birchwood Drive. And we have no issue providing a detail for the charging stations, which is 53. And then 54 speaks about how we used one post to make the signs double-sided. I revised those to not be double-sided, that we put two different signs. We're happy to do that. We'll make that change. And then we acknowledge those permits, and we're happy to apply for the permits that are required. You'll hear from Lee Klein on the letter of no interest as well. As for the new comments, at the bottom of the letter, we have no issue providing a north arrow on the tax map. We can provide the sidewalk connection on 34. That's just right here. Let me show you. We have no issue providing that. The dimension on Rosewood Drive, right now we have a 4-foot wide sidewalk. If you needed it to be wider, just let us know, but right now that's a 4-foot sidewalk. We already spoke about the trash enclosure. And then the signage testimony, I think you'll hear from that from the architect. And then any spillage, we'll make sure that in any resubmittal that we address any light spillage.
Any questions for Ms. Fleur?
Let's make sure.
Well, I'm going to go to the professional, but when you go back to new comments, item number 2, shouldn't that be Route 35, not Route 34?
Go back. 30, yes, it should be 35, but I think that was in,
It's a typo, I guess.
yeah, it's a typo in the
But
existing.
for the record, it's
Yeah.
Route 34 we're
Yep,
talking.
it's 35.
Route 35 we're talking about.
Yep, Route 35. Where was
Dar-
that? Where was that on here?
Under the new comments, last page you were just on? The very
Oh,
last-
yeah.
No, you didn't. We want to change that to Route 35. Mr. Darchi. You going? Mr. Prosco's going? Okay.
We're having our own little sidebar here, I apologize. I blame,
But I thought you
this is why,
charge on your car, that's what.
this is why they don't let us sit next to each other usually. Our report, as Ms. Flor said, is dated June 1st. From an engineering perspective, most of the engineering comments in our prior review letter have been addressed. The only concern that we have, and maybe Mr. Proska and Ms. Sawant may also want to speak to this as well, that the trash enclosure configuration is a little unorthodox. Typically, we don't have situations in town where we have a separate access for a trash enclosure where the trash truck basically is sticking out into a public road for the pickup of a refuse from a private site. So that's a little bit concerning. I understand the fire marshal's concern about not having it too close to the building. Typically, and I think maybe this is a planning thing, so I'll try not to tread on it too much, but that sort of speaks to the site suitability, I think, because you want to have those kind of things contained on site. So what I'm saying is if you had it on site, it's possible to meet the fire marshal's requirement and have it on site, but that would then mean that you would wind up losing some parking spaces, right? And we don't want to have the parking variance, so it's sort of a pick your poison kind of thing. And I think that sort of speaks to the site suitability a little bit. So that's the concern that that I have as far as the trash enclosure goes, having it out there and accessed off of a public roadway. The remaining, like I said, engineering comments have been addressed. I think the crux of this project, however, isn't really an engineering exercise. It's really more of a planning exercise. So I'll do my favorite thing and defer to Vino to discuss that.
So, board members, just to reiterate on what Rakesh said, I mean, my concern is I've not seen in Old Bridge anywhere where we have a separate entrance just for the trash enclosure. And to be very blunt is, if the trash enclosure was accessed through the parking lot, what happens is you lose parking spaces, right? Here, you're trying to meet the parking requirement, eliminate that variance, but to eliminate that variance, you're creating 3 other waivers for the driveway, separate driveway location. So is that sound planning? That's the real question, because, I mean, you've seen my memo, and I know it's more planning, but you're here for a D2 use variance. You have to, and somewhere in my memo, I say that typically when it's a D2 use variance, your proofs required are more liberal or not as stringent as a D1, but when the intensity of the site changes and you're asking for a D2, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when the intensity changes, then there is case law that requires you to provide the same proofs as in the Medici case, right? So here, when I see this weird configuration, the question that comes to my mind is, again, the site suitability. So something that you should consider, you should decide whether asking for that variance and eliminating those 3 waivers is important to you, or create a design which is so unusual, because and the board might chime in too, I have not seen a separate entrance for a trash enclosure. So that's my comment, Brian.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. A few things just to piggyback off what Vina and Rakesh have mentioned. Outside of the trash enclosure, a couple traffic-related items that I think the design waivers require some testimony regarding is the spacing of the access from Rosewood, to understand what the impacts that may have for the required design waiver that they're seeking. And the second one is, it goes to the site suitability, but the size of the parking lot. You've heard some testimony that the RSIS requires a drive aisle of 18 feet, which they're proposing for the site, but typical industry standards would be a 19-foot space for those parking that are at an angle, and this site plan has 18 feet. So I think it's important for the board to hear testimony to support the design waiver associated with the parking area.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. You can respond.
Just to explain, the 18 feet is in this direction. The actual length of the stall is longer than that. So the actual length of the stall does meet RSIS, and we also can provide turning templates to show that the 18 feet works, if that would be helpful. I did bring those.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for the board.
Okay, so I can roll those out. And then in addition to that, the same thing with the refuse area. We did run a turning template to show that it won't, that the refuse vehicle could turn in and back out. And usually when the refuse comes, it's at off hours. It's not in the middle of the day. Hold on one second.
Were the turning templates submitted with the application?
They were. I don't have the one backing in and out of the stall, but I can provide that as a condition of approval.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
For the in and out of the parking stalls, I can provide that as a condition of approval, but we did definitely run that for the 18. And then for the, if you go to the next one, I think it's the one with the, yes, that one. And this one here on Rosewood is showing the turning movement and with the curb return radiuses. I know it's still unconventional, but we did run them to make sure that the vehicle could pull in there and back out. But I guess the decision is, would you prefer a parking variance is what I think you're asking on that, so I can't answer.
The one thing that comes to my mind is this property directly abuts residential use. By this configuration, now you have a trash enclosure closer to the residential use. So in terms of negative impact, you're creating more of a negative impact to the neighboring property. If you have access for the refuse area from the parking lot, it will be further away from the residential property too.
Instead of a
You're not being televised, recorded, I should say.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me now?
I can.
So one option could be, and I mean, the owner's here, I'd have to ask him, but one option could be, in lieu of a dumpster, we use totes, in which case we would move it within 20 feet of the building. You wouldn't have a separate access. We would provide a sidewalk that connects down, and those could be rolled off, and a private hauler would just have to roll the totes out.
Okay,
But I would have to run that by the owner.
understood.
But that would avoid the second refuse access, and it would also avoid a parking variance.
I would defer to the engineer.
Okay.
So the tote idea, that it's a bit cumbersome, I guess, right? Because given the number of units you have, I imagine you're probably going to need, I don't know, maybe 8 to maybe a dozen totes, maybe. And then the question becomes, where do these totes get stored? How are they accessed by the residents? I think that might be maybe more of a cumbersome issue, but it's something that I understand. You know, we're sort of spitballing ideas, right? So I understand that, but that's also fraught with its own issues, I believe.
Well, there are 8 units there now, so the owner would be able to say how much refuse is generated now, so we could probably answer that question.
See, the problem with those totes is that over a period of time, they just are scattered on the site. Site maintenance is an issue. I mean, I would rather prefer to have a designated trash enclosure which is screened, because our ordinance does not allow you to have trash just.
We would
you know.
still screen it. We would still keep it in the same
Correct.
refuse area.
So I would prefer a fixed trash enclosure over the tots, because then, and we're talking about 13 apartments, so there will be significant trash, right? So the practicality of it is questionable. I don't know how the board feels about it.
We would just keep it Mr. Chairman, we would just keep it in the same trash enclosure, which is in lieu of a dumpster, we would just use multiple totes. We wouldn't have them scattered throughout the site.
Sometimes I think those totes with the best intentions, but then you have the residents who move them to their liking.
Yeah.
So, well, the landlord may want them on that side of the room. It's far more convenient for them to move over. Then you have them scattered all over.
Okay.
And you're right on the highway there, too, so anybody that's going to roll it out, it may wind up out on 35. Mr. Proskauer, anybody else on that side before I move on?
Just a follow-up, so in terms of the layout that you have proposed now, it looks, based on the plan that you have up, that the back of the trashing truck is going to be in the public road. So has there been any thought in terms of the safety of the trash truck, backing out into public road or sitting out in the public road? What I've seen in the past, especially in kind of a city-urban environment when you may have this type of situation, is a requirement of some sort of flagger situation to mitigate any safety issues to the public roadway. Is that something that's been contemplated?
We could have the traffic
or would be
engineer
considered?
testify to that, but this is, Rosewood Avenue at the off hours that they would be having the refuse pickup. And the fact that the refuse hauler would typically step out, like it's pretty typical that there's more than one individual in there if they needed any assistance backing out of the space. I don't see it as unsafe, if that's the question.
So, Mr. Chair and the board, I think that's kind of what you're weighing is the waiver that they're asking. You can kind of see, what the conflict may be with the public road, and is there a safety issue or not? And it sounds like you'll hear from their traffic expert to provide some additional testimony regarding that.
Yeah, they may have a problem with the hauler themselves, who may say, we can't do that, we can't pick it up, it's too much liability because our vehicle's out in the roadway. Do you have a regular-sized dumpster there, like 5-yard or 3?
I would have to ask the owner if you give me 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Maybe find out how it's done now.
The owner said it's a 2.5-yard dumpster, and it gets picked up once a week. And that's for 8 units and the retail.
And it's mechanical lift truck, right?
It would
Yeah, you
have to
don't.
be, yeah.
Yeah, they don't lift 2 yards by themselves. Okay. And he drives straight in, right?
Well, he drives in
Now.
and would have to back out now onto 35, because if you look at the existing site, if you could pull up, if you don't mind, on the existing plans, if you go to the existing conditions. Yeah, that one right there. I know it's hard to see because it's light, but Right now, it pulls in and has to back out onto 35 with 5 parking spaces there, so it's very tight.
Okay,
Okay?
well, we move on.
Thank you.
I'm going to have our architect.
No, we didn't get to see if the board has any questions. Okay. Professionals are done. Board members, I'll start on my left. Any questions for the engineer? None at this point? Okay.
How close is the dumpster going to be to the property line in the back?
If you give me 1 second, I can scale that. Hold on 1 second. At its closest point, it scales at 12 feet.
12 feet?
At the closest point. You see how it's angled? I took it from the closest.
Thank you.
Mr. Scogno, go ahead.
Yes, I did have a question. Regarding the facade of the apartments, have you mentioned anything about that? Because it seemed to be outdated to me.
Well, the good news is we have an architect, and they have revised the facade, so he's here to testify on that.
Oh, he's good. Oh, thank you.
Ms. Andrews? Okay, you can move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
So I'll have our architect come up now.
Good evening. Good evening, sir. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this matter before the board?
I do.
And can we have your name, sir?
Scott Nickel, Nicholl.
Scott, if you could please provide your qualifications for the board.
Sure. I am a licensed architect in New Jersey since 2017. The name of my firm is Tecton Architecture Studios, and we're currently located in Hazlet, New Jersey. I've spoken in front of many boards in the Bay Shore area, but never had the privilege in front of Old Bridge in this board.
Very good. Your license is current, I'm assuming?
Yes.
We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you, Chairman. Scott, if you could just describe what the proposed site is going to look like.
Sure. And again, after going through the report again today, I did want to apologize to everyone. We've been obviously coordinating everything back and forth with consultants, but having you not seen that last revision of architecturals having to do with all the site changes, I do apologize. It didn't make its way to your desks. But that probably makes... Oh, thank you. So this is probably a good time for us to note these into... They're just updated drawings from those same sets.
Okay.
A10, which was originally June 23rd, 2021, per the report. And this is updated November 22nd, 2022.
Okay.
And these are new proposed plans, architecturals. As was noted before, it is an existing multi-use building, 8 current units landing on the first and a partial second floor of the building, in addition to a retail space all the way at the end towards 35. Those units now vary between studio, single bedroom, and double bedrooms. And our intention was to continue that double height space, bring it around to continue that L, in addition to adding a double height addition at the side. We've stepped back that addition 6 feet to give us a little bit of a shadow line there, make it a little more interesting. It's very monotonous elevation along that entire facade. But in doing so, we've added those 2 units on the end in that addition, in addition to 3 others at that second story, finishing off that second level. We've updated the elevation, and I did hear that outdated had been mentioned. I know it was mentioned in the report. I think more the issue is just in disrepair and messy. You know, a brick is classic and certainly popular in the area. I don't think there's issues with that material choice. It's just the way that it's being used right now and the terrible look of the roof and the fascia, which are very messy. This new design with an extension of the addition being all new clapboard, and again, clapboard at that first story addition also, would entail a completely new roof, which would be new asphalt, new fascia boards, new gutters, strong 6-inch gutters across the front. And again, this is in keeping with the residential buildings towards the west of the property. But also keeps that same brick scale that comes down 35. So we're not treating this as a residential or a single-family home sitting on the highway. And then I believe the only other note, which was mentioned by Ms. Floor, was the second bedroom for Unit 6, existing office space. So the existing office space is currently right here on this end of the L towards Route 35. And per the existing plans or existing use, this is currently, the note is that this other half of this end is being used, was being used, I imagine, as commercial space, and per this design is getting changed as to become part of a unit and become residential. But it's my understanding that it currently is residential and part of the residential use. And correct me if I'm wrong about that note, about your comment.
So what I was trying to figure out is, since the commercial use has reduced, was there a change in bedroom composition for that unit there? Did you add a bedroom or the square footage went up? We couldn't figure that out because we didn't have the revised architectural, so.
Of course. My understanding that we have not changed the size of the commercial use at all. It must have been a discrepancy in our square footages. To get that unit number down, which we've done over the past couple iterations. We previously had a 14 units instead of 14 units instead of 13. We just changed the size and orientation of some of the rooms. So changing things from a single bedroom to a double bedroom or vice versa. The commercial space was never changed, per my understanding.
No, so did the bedrooms change? So suppose, to give you an example, if there were 4 one-bedroom units previously and 4 two-bedrooms, did the bedroom count increase is the question.
Yeah, let me just find out exactly the number. I see, excuse me. So when we went from 14 to 13, there were adjustments made to some of the public spaces, living rooms, family rooms, but in addition, we had to move, in the original plan, we had a utility space, some private storage also, that was happening in the basement of that addition. We removed the basement, and that space ended up back into our plan. So that was the area that essentially was taken from part of that 14th unit, and how we were able to get down to 13.
So which
with the
means
same
no
footprint.
change, which means no change in the bedroom
Exactly.
composition.
Yes, that is correct.
Just to explain to the board, the reason I was asking the question is, they reduced one unit, they reduced the commercial use, so whatever was reduced, where did that go? What was that used for is the question. Were there more bedrooms added? Because if instead of a 2-bedroom, now you have a 3-bedroom unit, it changes or it impacts the parking, and that's where I was getting at. In terms of the architecture, I didn't get a chance to review it, and I would just recommend that should the board act favorably on this application during compliance review stage, I would want to work with you with any comments I may have. The one thing that comes to my mind, again, I'm trying to read those plans from here. I don't have great eyesight. So the recent projects that were done in Old Bridge have much more modern look. We are introducing stone in place of brick, because brick has been the style of the 80s and the 90s, but now we do a combination with stone and brick. So we would want to see some sort of modern look to the building. I do understand trying to camouflage it with the neighboring residential uses too, but again, you're on a highway. I definitely would like to work with you.
Oh, absolutely. And though I do believe the brick is more a classical move, and I'd hate to remove brick to put up stone, despite I know there's a lot of new homes that are using partial stone and partial siding, which is understandable. What we'd more like to do is work with trim in the new clapboard and maybe bring that across to include in the brick. But I completely understand, and yes, of course, we'd love to work with you to kind of get the best facades, both front and sides.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Of course.
That's all on my end.
Were you finished with your testimony, sir?
I was, unless there was any other items I'd missed.
I didn't know
on
if you had anything more.
I think so.
Okay. Mr. Darchi, did you have anything for him?
I don't have anything for the
Mr. Praska? No? Okay, let me see if the board on my left of the witness. Ms. Andrews?
Just the commercial space would be the psychic store. The psychic, correct? The only commercial that will be in the.
Currently, yes, but yeah, it would be zoned retail, I believe.
So then it would just be that one portion of the complex that would be a commercial. The rest is all residential.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dasty, was there anything? None, sir. You can continue.
I'm going to have our traffic expert come up.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol.
Hello, sir. Do you swear or affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board?
I do.
Can we have your name, sir?
Lee, middle initial D as in Daniel, Klein, K-L-E-I-N. I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My license is current and in good standing. I actually was before this board a couple of years ago. I think before COVID, yeah, obviously before COVID. I've been before well over 100 planning and zoning boards throughout New Jersey, testifying for applicants.
We'll accept your credentials and your expertise, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Klein, can you please talk about the site itself and the proposed traffic?
Yeah, I have a report that I did, and then I'll try to touch on the comments as I go through my report. I prepared a report dated February 17th, 2023, entitled Traffic Engineering Evaluation, Proposed Mixed-Use Development, 69 Route 35. And in that report, I developed a trip generation table, which is in that report, Table 1, the trip generation for a weekday AM peak hour, PM peak hour, and a Saturday peak hour. As you heard before, the witnesses before me, currently 7 units, 290 square feet of retail. We're proposing 13 units and 290 square feet of retail. The increase of the 6 additional dwelling units is approximately 3 trips in the morning peak hour, 4 trips during the PM peak hour, and 6 trips on a Saturday peak hour. So that's considered an insignificant increase in traffic. The overall development currently generates about 4 trips in the morning, 14 trips in the evening, and 11 trips on a Saturday. So we're not doubling it, but we're adding, like I said, less than a half a dozen trips during those peak hours. So that's an insignificant increase in traffic. Also based on the circulation, we've got an entrance on Route 35, exit only onto Rosewood, and that's going to be one-way circulation. So the number of trips will be half that. The ones that come in, and then the other half they go out. So to go through the comments, like I said, we did the. So when it comes to a letter of no interest, currently DOT is a little bit backed up. To send them a letter of a request for a letter of no interest for something this small to begin with such an insignificant increase in traffic, it would just be a delay. It would take probably, right now, they're probably looking at 6 months to get that type of letter back to us. I don't know if the traffic engineer for the board can concur with me that based on the existing number of trips, the proposed number of trips, we're well under the 100 peak hour trips accessing the state highway. So we would get that letter of no interest, it's just that it takes time to do that. As far as the parking goes, I believe we meet the parking requirement with the electric vehicle charging credits, 23 required with that credit, 23 proposed. Based on the geometry, I think Ms. Fleur explained the angles and the lengths and the sizes of the parking spaces. It's a nice angled situation here. We're looking at, the length of the parking space. It's not on the drawing, but that's at least 18 feet. Is that better? So it's 9 feet wide as a car comes into it. It's at least 18 feet from a little beyond the curb stop, which is where your wheels would go, back to the end. So it's properly designed. The angle is such that only an 18-foot wide one-way drive aisle is necessary. I think we've got some depth here, so when a car comes in, and some width, so when a car comes in, if someone were to be backing out of the ADA spot and another car were to come in wishing to park in that same ADA spot, there's enough room for that vehicle to back out while the other vehicle's waiting. What are some of the other things? I'm not sure where we ended it with the trash enclosure, but there are some areas throughout the site that, along this no parking fire lane section, if it's possible to bring the garbage cans to that point, and the garbage truck could pull in that way and pull the cans out. Or again, if the cans were in an enclosure, brought out to the sidewalk here, picked up by a private hauler along the side of the road, the cans put back in the enclosure, close the enclosure, and the vehicle can drive on. So I think there's a couple of options for that. What else? Loading space. To me, I think this type of a use would get UPS, FedEx, Uber delivery, Grubhub, Amazon, and so forth, and those vehicles would just park in an empty spot while they're delivering to the building. Same for the commercial. I don't think a commercial spot with 290 square feet is going to have a large truck delivering supplies to it. So I think any kind of a delivery truck could park in any one of the spots that are available for a short duration. I think that's it, right? So again, in my conclusions to my traffic report, we have adequate parking proposed, we meet the requirements, and the number of trips that are going to be generated by the additional 6 dwelling units is very insignificant, and it's not going to have any kind of an impact to the local street, Route 35 or to Rosewood.
Go to the professionals. Mr. Praska?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few follow-ups, Lee. I think one of the design waivers that you're requesting is the separation from for the driveway on Rosewood from Route 35. Have you?
This distance from?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Have you analyzed that, or can you opine on the safety of that separation to support that design waiver?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very low trip generation site. So if I look at all the exit numbers in the future condition, the biggest number exiting
is 8 on a Saturday and 8 on a weekday. So we're talking about 8 vehicles coming out in a 1-hour period. Do the math, it's a very infrequent number of vehicles coming out. I think sight distance is good. Traffic that's slowing down to turn right if they're going up Rosewood would have a good sight triangle. If somebody's trying to turn left to wait onto Rosewood to turn onto Route 35, they could do that. Or if they're turning right to go back through the neighborhood, I think that's something that could be done as well, safely.
Do you have a sense of, the level of traffic that Rosewood has, given the, the location and kind of the uses that are on that road? I
don't. I didn't see if there were any numbers from DOT's website or just to look in general at a map. No, I don't have that feel for that.
In terms of the parking, I think we had noted in the community impact statement that there may be somewhere in the order of magnitude of 11 adults in the existing 8 units. Is that from your perspective, is that a typical number that you would see for residential type units that would support a typical industry type standard parking need, or is that higher or lower in your opinion?
Well, we've got more than one parking space per unit. And we're in a suburban type of an area. Because we met the requirement, I didn't go into the ITE numbers to see what the parking generation would yield.
Okay. I think the final comment, so the parking lot layout, so the 18-foot aisle width, I think, that meets RSIS, that meets typical industry standards.
Correct.
The 18-foot width, because it's at an angle, that width increases. So, industry standards typically 19 feet for that vehicle projection.
That direction, perpendicular to the curb, as opposed to the length
Correct,
of the,
correct. So, based on the layout, we're showing 18 with a double-sided loading and an 18-foot aisle width. Is it, in your opinion, is that sufficient to accommodate the maneuverability in and out of those parking spaces?
Yes, I think that if it's required, we could assign parking spaces to each unit. People get accustomed to how to park in their spot. They pull forward. We have wheel stops, so people can pull up to the wheel stop. So I think we're effectively getting a longer than 18 feet. If you were to measure another good foot, I would say, beyond that line that we have now. Because you've got to measure, from the tire, and then you've got the 1.5 to 2 feet overhang of the bumper.
Okay. I think the last question I have for you, or request for you for some additional testimony regarding that design waiver for the currently proposed trash enclosure, and the potential conflict with the public road. Do you see any issues there, or can you provide some testimony to kind of support that design waiver of the trash truck kind of overhanging the road when it picks up?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about once a week if we go to a larger dumpster enclosure. So once a week, and again, depending on who he contracts with, we can have it during an off time when traffic is not busy. It could be, before 7 a.m., but not before 6. Could have it in the evening, but not after, 10 p.m. when the volumes are lower.
I think that's everything, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Darcy, no? Okay. Ms. Swan?
I don't have anything.
Board members on my left.
Rosewood is a two-way street.
Correct.
Not right now.
Mr. Scogno?
What's the speed limit on that road?
On Rosewood?
Yeah.
I would think 25.
And the main road, what's that, 35?
It's 40 there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I think it is.
40 miles an hour.
40 miles an hour. So if one had a green light straight through, do you have an off-road to get into the development?
A deceleration lane?
Yes.
No.
No, there isn't.
I don't think we do, no.
Yeah, I found that rather rushful when I went there. It's quickly get in with the traffic behind you. So it's something, has there been many accidents in that? Have you researched that?
I did not research
You
that.
did not research that, yeah. Is the owner aware of that? Any accidents entering?
I'd have to ask the owner.
Okay.
I mean, we do have a wide driveway, so you're able to go.
Yes,
in a
but you
little-
have to get in quickly.
Right, correct. And that's what I'm saying. And we have the width of that driveway to make that turn.
Thank you.
Mr. Stoner? Mr. Connor? Ms. Andrews?
No, I just want to, also, I went, and you've got to be very quick to get in there. When the traffic, it may be 40 miles an hour, but that's not what people are going at. So it's going to be a little bit rough. And also with regarding to the, because I don't know about parking, I leave it to the professionals, but the only thing that I'm listening to is if you're having it on an angle, you should have it a foot more because of the curb where you're losing space there. Why is it on an angle? Why not straight, so that if you wanted to use 18 feet rather than 19 feet, you would have all of that more in the middle?
If you made these
I can't
perpendicular?
talk professional terms, I'm just looking.
That's okay, yeah, if you made these perpendicular? the
Yeah,
angle,
why not?
Then we need a,
not?
then we need a 24-foot wide aisle to make the swing.
Okay,
So we're not making a full 90-degree turn, so that's why we're able to do it in 18 feet. If we were to make it a 90-degree angle, then in order to get that maneuver, you'd have to have more of a 22 to 24-foot wide.
remember, I'm a woman driver, as a sexist would.
So then I'll see you need 25 or 26.
No, because I'm concerned
Or
when
she said she
the
could do it.
gentleman said 19 feet, but you're doing 18 feet. And that, to me, is a big deal when you're coming out and somebody else is coming out at the same time.
Oh, you're saying reversing?
No, not
If I'm,
reversing.
if I'm pulling out of this spot and somebody over here is pulling out of that spot?
Yeah, because you're losing that 1 foot on each side, so it actually comes out to 2 feet in the middle.
No, no, no. The 18-foot wide drive aisle is the correct width, correct? Right, so that's correct. It's the depth of the car parking spot. So if people don't pull up to the wheel stop and they don't pull up to the curb, then they could protrude. But again, cars are 16 and a half feet. You do the math, the
And that
hypotenuse
takes
of it.
into consideration the larger SUVs?
Yes, yes.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's the Suburban is closer to 18 feet or 17.6, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
What's the distance from Route 35 to the beginning of the driveway?
Route
On
30.
Rose- That's like a Rosewood?
This distance here?
Yeah.
Probably a little over 30 feet, 35 feet, but yeah, about that.
There'll be no interference with anything when you, how far out can the car come from the parking lots to look to its left? Yeah, I mean,
Oh, it could pull out, yeah, to this point where they can see somebody coming around the corner.
so 35 is rather quick.
And it's more than a 90-degree turn. It's like 125, 135-degree angle, so you really got to slow down to make that turn as well.
All right, thank you. Absent any further questions of this witness, Mr. Alfieri, we have now come to 9 o'clock. I still have to open a public portion. My suggestion would be that we stop at this point, save your planner, I think that's your last witness, correct? For our next get-together? Would that be satisfactory, sir?
That's fine.
Natalie,
So, go ahead,
what's the
Ms. Watt.
I asked Natalie to check the date.
We could put that in the record in a few minutes. Let me open up the public portion while we save some time. This is a matter 50-2021Z, OBNJ LLC, located 69 Highway 35 for an apartment addition. Does anyone here in the room wish to be heard? Please raise your hand. Come forward, sir. We're going to get a portable mic for you. And, of course, the board attorney will swear you in.
How are you doing, sir?
Hold on.
Dennis Kessler,
Do you swear ever to testify the truth in this matter?
I do.
Can you spell your last name?
Kessler.
Thank you.
I reside at 1039 Lovell Place, North Brunswick, New Jersey. I'm the owner of the Dennis Kessler Profit Sharing Plan, which owns the property just north of Highway 35. That was formerly the pirate ship property. I'd just like to urge the board to approve this measure because I think it's exactly what we've been discussing about improving and redeveloping the Highway 35 through Lawrence Harbor and Cliffwood Beach. I think that if we have a really nice landscaping plan, which I heard was improved since the original, that it will really improve the appearance of Highway 35 in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Kessler.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion for this evening. What did we come up for a date? August 3? All right, for those watching at home and those here in the audience, this matter will be continued to on the August 3rd agenda. No further notice. So if you're interested in this matter, we'll be bringing it back on the 3rd for another witness. Is that okay, Mr. Klein? I see you looking. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, we agree on that.
And Mr. Alfieri, you'll waive any time requirements or time
Yes.
back on the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the
Thank you and your witnesses, Mr. Alfieri. Appreciate it. We can. We're going to take a 5-minute break for those watching at home. The stenographer needs to exercise her fingers, I think, or maybe it's over-exercised. We go on recess, please. from the recess. We're gonna call the last matter in. Let's have a roll call. Sorry, my microphone wasn't on. Roll call, please, Ms. C.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Present.
Mr. Scogno?
Here.
Mr. Izzo?
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Andrews?
Here.
Mr. Izzo?
Here.
Mr. Dasty?
Here.
Mr. Dargy?
Present.
Mr. Praska?
Here.
Ms. Sawant?
Here.
Myself, Ms. C, thank you.
All right, after recess, this is the final application for the evening, if you happen to be watching at home, and for those in the audience. 31-2022Z, EOM 538R34 LLC. It's located in the low-density residential R30, block 11252.14, lot 21.11. Physical locations 538 Route 34. Mixed use. We're going to require a D variance this evening. Peter Clauser, Esquire, representing the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, public, and your professional staff. This is the application. I've been back in front of this board a couple of times for this application. We were here a few months ago where the board granted a minor subdivision. Part of that application at that time was to request an amendment to the variance relief to allow particular commercial uses. This application received its final approval in, I think, January of 2020. So the nature of commercial space shortly thereafter changed dramatically. The resolution of the original approvals used words like commercial and retail interchangeably and didn't identify, very specific uses. So what we're asking the board tonight is really twofold. One is to permit the uses that are permitted in the EDO 1 zone to be utilized at the site, with the exception of a handful of uses which are identified in Vina's report, and we agree to. I think there's 6 uses which just don't make any sense at the site. Also to allow, and this is where I used the wrong word, I used the word entertainment, but really the word is the recreation use, which Vina has corrected me. That's what you have in your definition. And I agree with her and her proposed types of uses, the things that we see now in these strip centers, sometimes the axe throwing place, the golf swing suite, not nightclubs, that's not what we're about here. This is more of the recreation use. So we agree with her report and those types of uses she's described. So that's the first part of it. And the second part of it is because the original resolutions weren't entirely clear, and we want to clear it up, we also got an idea. We've sat with your professionals, and I'm not suggesting that they agree with everything I'm saying, but we sat with them and tried to come up with a plan for how we can handle this moving forward, because it puts the applicant, owner, operator of the property, and it puts your zoning officer and your planning department in a bad spot. Every time a new use comes in, we have to say, is this what the board meant? Is this what it meant? So first, we're trying to identify a very specific list of uses, which is EDO 1, and then I'm asking the board to empower your professional staff to review the parking on the site against what uses are there when they're there and we're up and running, and what new use may be proposed. And it's what it's called to do a shared parking analysis. So you'll see that McDonough Ray submitted a report as part of this application, which was attached to Vina's report, which kind of gave a couple of different scenarios of what a shared parking analysis looks like. That's in no way indicative of a current set of tenants or anything like that we have. It's just an example. When we met with Damien, we met with Vina, they said, show us what it looks like, what it might look like, so that we can understand what it is you're asking for. And so that's what we did. We presented just a mere sample of uses that are in the EDO 1, incorporating one of the recreational uses, the swing suite. So those are the 2 requests. Please let us have the specifically identified EDO 1 uses with the exceptions that Vina points out, allow some level of recreation use, which is kind of described in Vina's report, and then allow the professional staff to help us juggle the uses based on the parking capacity in the commercial portion of the site. There are 3 witnesses this evening that we have. The owner and operator of the site, Noah, who I believe testified last time for the minor subdivision. And then we have John Ray, who can just briefly explain what's in his report and how he would handle a shared parking analysis, and then Jim Higgins, because we have variance relief. So if I could, I'd like to have Noah introduce himself and be sworn, and then just talk to you a little bit about what it's been like to try and find tenants for the site and the types of tenants that he's seeing.
Mr. Dasty?
Mr. Friedman, can you raise your hand, sir? Do you affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board?
I do affirm.
And can we have your name again, sir?
Noah Friedman.
You can move that microphone a little bit towards you.
Move it close and speak into it, sir.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Good evening. Noah Friedman, the operator, owner of the property. Just to give just a brief description as to what's been so difficult by the retail portion of the site. As was mentioned, COVID completely changed everything. And what we've experienced has been for a year and a half, 2 years, we've been trying to market this property to just get tenants to occupy the space. And we've gotten a lot of different uses potentially that we thought were going to work well. And then we went to the zoning and we sort of hit a roadblock. And the reason for that was it wasn't never clear, apparently, I think, based on what was passed previously. And so Damien had a hard time figuring out, not figuring out, but had a hard time approving these uses, not because he didn't think it was proper for the site, but because he didn't think he had the empowerment to be able to do so. So, just as far as the site's been concerned, we had an axe throwing tenant that wanted to come in, but that wasn't approved. We had a escape the room tenant that wasn't, I don't think, necessarily approved based on previous approvals. We had a couple other recreational uses also that clearly that's sort of where this site is. We have one tenant in there now that's signed up. It's a appliance store, I'm sorry. But it's been an incredible struggle to try to find tenants for that site. So that's what I've experienced for the last couple of years now.
And you've had the opportunity with me to review the permitted uses in the EDO1 zone, and my explanation to the board that those are the type of uses that you think would work for you throughout the site.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's some uses that we took out of the EDO1 zone, and we reviewed those, and you find those acceptable as they're identified in Vina's report.
Yes.
There's a couple of, the report has also indicated that restaurant uses are something that should be contemplated, but they're asking that you limit the amount of restaurant space to 30% of the overall space, and that's acceptable to you as well.
Yes.
And you're comfortable, and you understand that should the board grant this application, that you would be required to, when you have a tenant, get John or Scott to analyze the parking and present that along with the new tenant base to Damien and to Vina and the administration so that they could review it.
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions for Noah, but he's available to answer any of the board's questions.
Just for the, to refresh the board's memory, everyone knows where this is, right, on Route 34? There was 2 buildings up front and apartments in the back. Would you just kindly tell everybody, we kind of set down some guidance, and I think you picked some things. Wasn't there a dock in the box there in the corner? And then there was going to be a elder care?
No,
Or is it daycare?
No, that we ended up pulling that,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. That was in 2021. The only thing that this board has approved is that medical use is acceptable up to a certain square footage, a square footage equivalent of 1 building, but that was all.
Okay.
This would just be incorporated into that and part of any parking analysis that was submitted to the town.
Okay, we'll learn as we go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. He's available. I don't know if the board or your
Any
professionals
questions
have
from
any
the board members, professionals?
Just for the benefit of the residents, because I know I had received numerous calls during the day, I just want to give a little bit background. So this application or this request had come in 2020, first time, and the request at that time was for a use variance to allow medical office and childcare facility and a storage facility at that time. And we had raised concerns about parking and the type of parking that would be required basically on the site, and we thought it would be insufficient. So we had said we need to analyze this further. At that time, Mr. Clauser had requested that they only proceed with the medical use. And so the applicant received a use variance to allow medical office within the commercial use. So the property is allowed roughly 1,800 square feet of commercial space. Then later in 2022, an application was filed for a minor subdivision with the request that any use that is permitted in the CC, CN, and CR zone be permitted on the site. And at that time, we had said, wait a minute, that CR zone is along Route 9. It is meant for larger type of uses or which will attract more traffic. This is more like neighborhood commercial type of uses, and we really need to evaluate the parking conditions. So based on our comments, the applicant withdrew that request temporarily. They only proceeded with the minor subdivision, which was approved in the beginning of this year. At that time, I had requested that the applicant come back and meet with me and the zoning officer to discuss the potential uses. When we met, we kind of recommended that instead of asking for uses that are permitted in the CR zone, and CR zone is basically where Gateway Shopping Center is, the Kohl's, BJ's area is. So we said, we think the more appropriate type of uses for this location would be the Economic Development Opportunity 1 zone, which is small scale retail sales services, personal services, a medical office, a professional office, a small restaurant, those type of uses. And so we did meet with Mr. Clauser and the applicant, and the traffic consultant. We did some brainstorming sessions together to see how we can manage parking. And the new request is to allow uses in EDO1 zone, but not all the uses, because EDO1 zone allows a gas station. It allows a retail convenience store with fueling, which is a typical Wawa kind of a use. It also allows flex warehousing, mini warehousing. The applicant chooses to eliminate those uses. They're not going to propose those uses on the site. There was a request to also include in their notices entertainment use. But entertainment is an inaccurate terminology, or is not the correct word, because when you say entertainment use, to me, it is nightclubs, adult entertainment, cabarets, those type of uses. And I brought it to Peter's attention that I don't believe that was the intention. The intention was more recreational type of uses where kids can go and, escape rooms or this virtual golf center. So my knee-jerk reaction was I didn't review it. Even for the recreational use, I'm not comfortable, but I did have a chance to speak with our traffic consultant, our engineer, to, brainstorm and see what we can do. And I think the way we are thinking is probably limiting the square footage or limiting those uses might be a good solution. And then obviously every commercial property has shared parking. So some uses have different peak times. So to give you an example, a bagel store is open in the mornings, but it's closed in the evenings. Whereas a regular quality restaurant or this type of recreational use would be open in the evenings and would have different peak times. So that's what the discussion has been. Sorry, Peter. I thought it was important to explain to them the background.
I appreciate that. I think it's helpful for the board, too, to hear it from you.
Yes. So I don't have questions for Noah at this time.
Okay, and I don't think anybody on the board has any.
Then let's bring up John Ray, and he can maybe talk to the board a little bit about what shared parking is.
Thank you.
Raise your hand, please. Swear affirm to testify truthfully in this matter? I do. Can we have your name and service for the record?
John Ray, REA.
Thank you.
John, you prepared a report that was submitted to, that I submitted to
Just
the
have him
board.
tell the rest of the board who he is.
I'm sorry. I'm just so used to him
okay.
testifying so much.
A
If you
long
just
day, I'm
Get
sure.
your credentials on the record.
Yeah, thanks.
Peter played golf today, so I hope he played good.
The rest of us
You're not going to
worked.
feel bad for
That's
me
great.
because of that, John.
John Ray, REA, principal with McDonough and Ray Associates. I'm a licensed professional engineer. My field of specialty is traffic engineering, which includes...
And not to cut you off, but we had a newer...
And I've been here many times.
Yeah, and yes, you have, sir, many, many times.
Thank you.
So for those watching at home, you probably recognize face. For those on the board, Mr. Ray has testified before this board numerous occasions over the last 16 or 17 years that I've sat
Oh,
here.
it's been more than that.
A lot more for you, I'm sure, sir. We accept your credentials,
Almost
obviously.
as long as this guy back here.
So
Thank you.
If you could, and thanks, Mr. Chairman, for that. If you could share with the board a little bit about what a shared parking analysis
Sure.
is and how we would approach it when we're asking for zoning permits.
Okay, well, I think Venus started to give the board and people watching, at home or in the audience, some description of what shared parking is. And basically, as she indicated, it's a situation where the same parking space can be used by different users within the retail or commercial complex because they have different peak hours. And she used the example of a bagel shop, which of course would be busy in the morning. I always refer to the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual. I get information from the Parking Generation Manual on how much parking a particular tenant or land user would generate and what hours of the day their peak hours occur. And of course, a bagel shop would be 7 to 9 in the morning. A lot of these bagel shops are also open for lunch and you can go in and grab a sandwich, but the peak times for a bagel shop, for example, would always be in the morning. And as Venus said, a quality restaurant, a sit-down restaurant, something like Cafe Luna, which is in Renaissance Plaza on Route 9, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, it generates its peak parking in the evening after 6 o'clock, and the bagel shop's closed by then. So that's what shared parking is all about. My client and I discussed potential users and tenants for the property, and he gave me 3 scenarios to evaluate, and I wanted to just run through them. It'll only take about 10 minutes. As Mr. Friedman indicated, he does have a lease, if I understand it, with an appliance store, which is great because an appliance store is a very low parking generator. According to the ITE, we're looking at generating a maximum of about 3 parked vehicles during a peak hour for an appliance store. And so let me just go through the 3 scenarios that we discussed, which are likely, but again, we're not asking for these uses, but just we wanted to put a couple of scenarios together to see what the parking demand would look like. Scenario 1 would be a bagel shop of 3,500 square feet, which would probably be pretty large for a bagel shop, but we're trying to break the square footage down of the 9,000 square foot building into something that's reasonable. A 3,500 square foot appliance store and a 1,890 square foot children's wrestling instruction facility, which would be akin to a recreational use, I guess, not entertainment, but recreation. So I looked at those 3 scenarios, and of course, the bagel shop, again, would generate its peak parking demand in the morning between 7 and 9 a.m., and could generate a need for 28 parking spaces in the morning when it's busy. The appliance store would generate a need for 3 parking spaces, and their peak would be between 12 noon and 5 p.m. in the afternoon, again, offset from the bagel store. And the children's wrestling instruction facility would generate its peak after school is out in the afternoon when the parents came and dropped the kids off for the instruction. That would be after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, generally peaking between 3 and 7 p.m. when school is out. Those would be the hours when that, so the different peak hours for the 3 different uses. If Mr. Friedman was lucky enough to get those 3 tenants, it would work fine. We'd have plenty of available parking. Scenario 2 is the appliance store, which he has a tenant already and a lease signed for the appliance store, a 3,500 square foot quality restaurant, and again, an 1,890 square foot tutoring facility, something akin to Huntington Learning Center, which I think we've all seen. You'll see a lot of those Huntington Learning Center facilities in small strip centers, commercial centers around the state. So I evaluated those 3 uses, and again, the bagel shop peaks in the morning. the appliance store between 12 noon and 5 p.m., and similar to the wrestling instruction facility I talked about in scenario 1, the tutoring facility, again, will peak later in the afternoon after kids are dismissed from school, again, from approximately 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., so that scenario works out well for the parking situation. Scenario 3 is the appliance store. We have 4 different uses for scenario 3. A 3,000 square foot virtual golf facility, a 1,200 square foot deli, and a 1,200 square foot bagel store. And I ran through the peak hours for those facilities. And again, as Vina indicated, and I do have some experience with the virtual golf facilities. There's one in Wall Township in what used to be the Kmart shopping center on Route 35. It's now a Target. There is a virtual golf facility in there. They generate a need for about 15 parking spaces during a peak, and their peaks are generally on the weekend, not even during weekdays. But the peak hours for the virtual golf facility on a weekday are always in the evening, too, when people are off from work. It's after 5, 6 o'clock in the evening when they tend to peak, which would be offset again from the bagel store and offset from the appliance store, too, which would probably be closed by 5 o'clock when the virtual golf facility starts to peak. So again, those 4 uses would have non-coincident peak parking demands, and the parking that we have for, and I'm a little bit uncertain as to whether we're looking at the 2 9,000 square foot buildings combined with 105 parking spaces, or we're looking at the one building with 55 parking spaces. But in my estimation, it works either way with respect to the shared parking. My understanding is that we do have a general approval, if I'm not mistaken, for medical office use for the first building that's under construction right now. And so that would generate a need for about 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, be about 45 spaces, but I think there are 50 spaces associated with the first building, so that works. And again, that parking could be used, it's interchangeable between the 2 buildings. And of course, a medical office facility would not be busy in the evening when we might have a quality restaurant that would need some of that parking. I kind of mentioned Cafe Luna because as I came up and drove up Route 9, I saw it was pretty busy tonight. You can get a busy quality restaurant in one of these small commercial centers that generates a significant amount of parking, but it's always in the evening for dinner when the other stores and the other tenants are generating very little or no traffic. So the shared parking scenario is real. It's something we would just like the board to consider. As Peter indicated, we would work with your professionals to make sure that the tenant mix that ultimately goes into these buildings is something that doesn't generate a parking demand that is too heavy for what we've provided.
Thanks, John. So that's just by way of example of the type of thing that would be submitted to your professionals for them to, that's what I'm asking the board to do, is hand over something like this is what they would be reviewing to make sure that the tenant mix is appropriate for the parking that's out there.
When you say handover, so that you wouldn't have to come back here, right?
Right. So we don't have to come back here every time. And you're the ultimate arbiter of the board. If we can't come to an agreement on a particular tenant mix or something, we always have the board to act as our appeal court. But
I think it makes perfect sense. There was an application earlier where there's a reuse or repurpose of a building. Otherwise, it's going to stay empty, and that's not a good thing. And this is a nice build. It's not far from where I live. And the last thing I want to see is empty storefronts with these beautiful apartments in the back. And these seem to be more uses that might appeal to the people who are living there, where they don't have to go too far to obtain these services or food items. So I think it makes perfect sense. I'm just one vote, though. We'll see if anybody else agrees. Any comments on this thought?
Good.
Good, bad, indifferent?
Good.
Okay. Leon, anything? Mr. Stoner? No. Mr. Connor?
It makes sense.
Ms. Andrews?
I don't like to see empty stores either.
if I could, then I'll bring up Jim because I think we have an obligation to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I asked you guys.
Sure. Good evening again. Board. We didn't take any exceptions to Mr. Ray's scenarios that he provided for the parking analysis. It kind of gives you a broad overview of what the different uses that are permitted in the zone might look like. Some of the comments that we had in our collective review letter really geared towards the more intensive type uses, the restaurant uses. And the suggestion from the professionals was to cap the restaurant space at 30% over the overall square footage. I think Mr. Clauser has agreed to that. However, in light of the kind of the entertainment that we've heard, since we not entertainment, I'm
Don't
sorry,
use that word.
I'm sorry, the recreational type uses. The concern that we've been talking about on the dais today is they overlap with the restaurant type use, and they're some of the more intensive parking uses that you might see, but they do vary a lot depending on what that entertainment or recreational type use might be. So the suggestion that we are offering is to include that 30% cap for entertainment and restaurant uses for the site.
Yeah, I think Mr. Clauser is going on the record as saying that would be acceptable if this works
The
out.
restaurant being capped at 30%, not necessarily incorporating, that's something that just came up, incorporating the retail. That was sort of the sidebar, the recreational inside that 30%. We would certainly consider a cap. I'm kind of caught out here a little bit where we haven't really evaluated that. So as far as restaurant is concerned, which was the comment in the report, we would completely agree to that being a 30% cap. My suggestion would be maybe if we had, I'd like to have the board act on the application tonight, and then there's a gap where the board's acting on the application and then adopting a resolution. I don't know if it's acceptable to your professionals or to the board, if perhaps we could look at what would be an appropriate cap for a recreational use that could just find its way into the resolution between now and the time that gets adopted.
Well, I mean, if the board would rely upon the advice of the board planner to put that into a resolution, but it would have to be, it's kind of a one-way street, so you might want to be careful what you.
Well, my answer to the question is, I very much get the residential use. I'm misspeaking. The restaurant use. My answer to their question about, well, why can't we, can we also cap, recreational use? That's what this is all about. Giving them the authority to look at the recreational uses in conjunction with the other uses that are out there and cap it at that point. You can't have an axe throwing place now, Peter. You have too much parking at that time. That's the whole point of this exercise. So putting that additional cap on it doesn't make a lot of sense to me in a resolution, because it may be, and it's a good idea. I'm not discounting that, but that's the whole point of this approval, is to give them the authority to say, yeah, you could have the mini golf indoors because that happens on Saturdays and Sundays during the day when kids are using it, which is still a recreational use. But if we're going to do an axe throwing thing or something that might be more adults in the evening, that would conflict with restaurants that are already there. So we just wouldn't be allowed to have it, as opposed to placing kind of maybe an arbitrary cap right now. That's my thought.
I don't know what we're allowed by MLUL. That's why you guys talk about this,
So
and I don't know
Chris-
if we can give that away, but.
So, Chris,
Mr. Watt?
the reason, so with the recreational use, my concern and the rationale to cap it is, you just heard tonight, right? There was a billiard place that was approved, 10,500 square feet. When it's a axe throwing place, when it's a virtual golf place, right? These are more destination places. It's not something that just the residents that live in that development are going to go to that place. If there is no cap and you have 10,000 square feet of a use, then it's like hosting parties and, attracting more traffic. The other thing that came to my mind is, we have approved, the board, through use variance, has approved recreational type of uses within the township. And they were all approved in the EDO1 zone, right? Whether it was Highway 35, 34. This is a unique situation. This property is R30, R30. And it has residences backing up. With recreational use, the billiard place is going to be open till 2 a.m. My concern is we can't have a recreational use that is open that long, especially at this location. We have to have a limit on when it closes. There has to be limit on the scale of the use because it has to be much smaller than what is permitted in the EDO1 zones. The one other thing we were discussing is Sheila Court? Sheila Court, right? There is room for overflow parking. We do not want at any, in any situation, any overflow parking to be on Sheila Court. So we want to be able to evaluate the shared parking when you submit the change in tenancy or tenants, when you have a tenant, the zoning officer should be able to evaluate. If there's a parking variance situation, you come back to the board. So there were multiple things that we were trying to discuss. And with the restaurant and recreational, if you have a bagel shop and then you have a recreational use and a quality restaurant, I think it will still work at 30%, but I am okay to sit down with you and talk about it. You can proceed with the other uses and wait for a vote, and that's something Chris needs to guide us. I don't know how that can be handled.
So I don't know that, well, look, I think we should agree now what the cap's going to be. Because if not, then you're going to be back here anyway. So
Right, all right, so then to that end, we're in a good place as far as, the EDO1 uses are concerned. I don't want this to muck up, which is a productive evening. So perhaps we could get through the rest of it, get Jim up here, whatever other questions you might have for John, and then I'll take 2 minutes and talk to Noah and see if we can just wrap it all up right now.
And maybe, we have 2 traffic experts here. They can have a quick conversation as well.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can get through what we need to get onto
Absolutely.
the record. Okay, so step down, and if I can invite Mr. Higgins up.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Higgins. Do you swear or affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board?
I do.
Thank you. Just your name for the record
James
again.
W. Higgins, Higgins. I am a licensed professional planner in the state. I've been licensed for over 40 years. I've been testified before this board on numerous occasions and have been accepted as an expert in planning by this board.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins, for at least telling those at home watching to identify
Yes.
you if they haven't seen you.
Yeah,
before.
absolutely, yes.
So, of course, we accept your credentials.
Okay, thank you.
So we technically have a D1 use variance here, and maybe if you could just share with the board your
Yeah.
analysis.
Yeah. Well, the D1 has actually been approved. I think what we're doing here is refining that approval. The approval was broad, and it really wasn't that clear. What the applicant has come back in here and says you have 2 buildings with about 17,000 square feet of space that has been approved for commercial and office uses. And we're going to refine that so that, first of all, only specific uses can be permitted. And also, those uses can only be permitted in combination where the site can accommodate the parking that those uses will generate. So I think it's actually taking your prior approvals and really refining them and making them better fit the situation for the site. Clearly, the board has found in the past the site's particularly suited for commercial type use. And now what the applicant is saying is, yes, but we want it to be even better suited by controlling the parking that's going to be generated by the various uses in these buildings, and by have a mechanism for doing that, which is to allow the applicant to go to your planning department and have those uses reviewed, and to have the applicant's traffic expert review those uses in terms of what kind of parking and when they're going to generate the parking to make sure the site works. So I think it's actually a refinement of your prior approvals, and I think it's also an improvement over the prior approvals. And really, I think it advances your zone plan because it's going to guarantee that the parking that's available on this site is adequate for the uses that are being proposed. So I really think that there's no substantial detriment. I don't think it's going to impair the intent and purpose of your zone plan. It's going to actually make it even better in terms of the approval on the site. The other thing, just to touch on the issue of percent, what percentage of the building could be used for various uses. It's actually, that is a second level of protection. Because quite frankly, say for example, you have 30% of the space can be utilized for a restaurant, a quality restaurant. But if the other uses in those buildings generate more parking, that would not allow 30% of a 30% restaurant to be on the site, then the restaurant might only be able to be 25 or 20% of the total square footage of the building. So that the percentage is actually an extra level of protection. And that same thing would go for a recreational use, is that if the recreational use would generate more parking than the site could accommodate, then you couldn't have it. So I think what Peter was saying is that it might really not accomplish anything to limit the percent that a recreational use could be on the site, because it's going to be reviewed anyway. And even if it's below the percentage that the board may decide, if the site can't support it for the parking, then it's not going to be permitted.
Thank you, Joe.
How do you write that ambiguity, though, and see that it happens 10 years from now?
What?
Because we're mixing words here that I don't know how legally you put that on paper and enforce it. Again,
I think and
when
I've
this
seen this
man
done
perhaps
before.
sells the property, or 10 years down the road, people decide, I'm going to put in.
Yeah, but where I'm the consultant in Ocean Township in Monmouth County, this happens all the time.
Okay.
Is that you have you have a square footage of a building, and you have parking that's required, and if you have an analysis that shows that the building, the site can support the use that's being proposed within that building, then it's permitted. And that's the issue, and it's the issue is having a parking analysis submitted to your staff so they can look at it and say, okay, this works, or no, it doesn't work, you have to go back to the board.
You make it a condition of getting a zoning permit.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And I could record, which I might have even done already on this site, but I've certainly done it before with this board. I can record the resolution
subdivision
to the
as a
deed.
deed restriction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that, you just
Yeah.
actually, your whole resolution, I put one page on top of it and record it, so it's stuck with any property owner that buys it.
All right. Let's go to the professionals. Mr. Proska?
I don't think I have anything, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Dargy?
I don't have any questions to the applicant's planner.
Mr. Watt?
Me neither.
Mr. Dasty, I'd just like you to talk to the board then and explain how, if we were to agree with that, how that would work. I mean, you
Sure,
said it,
so,
but
yeah, so.
I want everybody to understand it.
Sure, so, it's my
And
understanding.
the audience.
Sure, you've heard Mr. Ray's testimony with regard to this shared parking analysis, right? In terms of what type of uses would go there, and some, you would essentially be able to use one parking spot for different uses throughout the day. A bagel stop in the bagel place in the morning, the appliance store during the day, the restaurant at night, right? So one of the ways you can regulate this is if the board were to act favorably, it would require that when the bagel shop or the appliance place or wherever is going to get its zoning permit to open up shop in the shopping center or in the site, they would have to provide a circulation plan, not unlike what Mr. Ray has already done, to the zoning office for them to review to make sure that the site can sustain those three uses, different parts of the day, with the parking that's there. So that would be a condition of approval. They wouldn't be able to get new tenants in the site until they submit the application to the zoning office to make sure that the town's zoning officer and the planner know or are satisfied that there's sufficient parking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that would be okay with municipal land use law.
Sure, it would just be another condition of approval that, and if there was a disagreement, there would be language in the resolution that they have to come back here, and then you all would decide whether or not Vina's office was right, wink, wink, or if the applicant thought that there was sufficient parking.
And that's spelled out, so regardless of who would be the
Sure.
planner or the engineer here for the township, it would be pretty much set in stone.
Exactly. It'd be spelled out, yes.
Okay. Let me go to my left if anybody has any questions on the explanation.
No, I got it, I understand it.
Okay. Mr. Scogno? Okay. Mr. Stone is good? Mr. Connor and Ms. Andrews?
So basically, we're taking a hypothetical that there's bagel places.
Yeah, just put your mic on hold.
Try that again.
I'm sorry. Hypothetical that a bagel place is coming in, then we're going to have the appliance store, and then we're going to have the gourmet restaurant. So we're voting on a potential, but there's no guarantee that these three things are going to come in
It would
with
be.
the shared parking.
Yeah, I beg your pardon. It would be whatever potential tenants come in, there would have to be a parking analysis submitted to
Okay.
the zoning office to make sure that the site can, I mean, theoretically, if you had 3 bagel places, it would be a problem because they'd be there at the same,
Same time.
at the same hours of operation, so, right? Gentlemen?
Yes, yep.
Vina?
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. If you have more testimony, because
I
I
don't.
think
I
it'd be
just wanna-
important to go to the public. I think some of the
Absolutely.
public is here for this matter. I'm guessing that, but.
I want to just clarify a couple of things. What we're asking the board is that the EDO1 uses be permitted and the recreational type uses as generally described by Vina be permitted, subject to the submission of a shared parking analysis for the entire site to make sure that it works. As far as a cap is concerned on the retail and the restaurant, I just want to ask for a clarification. Vina, are you saying the 30% would be for both restaurant and all-in-one? So, okay. If that's the case, would you consider increasing that percentage to 50% of the site for the two of them? And then we would be able to agree to that cap?
No more than 30% for each or 50% each for two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Certainly, I had 2 minutes. Because that would be nice if we can get that settled on a number and put that right in the resolution, if it's acted on favorably.
Folks, there is going to be a public portion, so if you're on this matter.
So how about this? 30% restricted to restaurants and 50% to restaurants and recreation.
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
30% restaurants only, 50% combined, total, I should say, restaurants and rec.
That's correct.
Is that
Yep,
acceptable?
that works.
Okay. Mr. Clauser,
Just to help the residents, which translates into 8,890 square feet, but that 8,890 square feet would be inclusive of restaurant and recreational. So at no point will that be more than 8,890.
well, hold on. You're going to have to come forward. You can't talk from the audience. And I'm going to open a public portion as soon as I square that with Mr. Clauser. Is it okay?
I think it's time to do that.
All right.
We agree to that restriction, and we'd be more than glad to answer.
All right, thank you. This is 3120-2022Z, EOM 538R34 LLC, for mixed use on 538 Route 34. I'm going to open a public portion now pertaining to this matter. If anybody wants to be heard, please raise your hand. You can come forward, please. We'll get to everyone. The lady behind you, sir. We'll get to everybody who wants to speak. Board attorney has to swear you in, okay?
Hello, ma'am, how are you? Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this matter?
Yes.
Can we have your name, please?
Teal Vaughn,
Vaugh?
A.N.
A-N. Thank you.
I live at 4 Sheila Court. I'm directly behind the property. My concern naturally is parking, but my bigger concern is noise in a recreational type of setting, axe throwing. My bedroom's up feet away from this. So I'm urging the board to not approve a variance for recreation. We're talking about late hours. My bedroom's all facing the back. We're talking about lights coming in. This is a whole different ballgame than a restaurant that people don't eat usually past 10 o'clock, 10:30. We're talking about axe throwing. They have teams that go there. There's Bury the Hatchet right down the block. You're talking about a whole different scenario in a residential setting. I understand it's hard to get rentals, but we have put a lot of money into our homes, into our yards. This has been a nightmare to begin with. And to think that now I have an autistic son, I could hear hatchets being thrown all night or, golfing. It's just not the place for it. I mean, the marketplace is a different whole scene over there. There's not houses on top of it. So I have a real problem, and I'm urging this board to not approve a variance for this. It's very unfair.
When you say you just don't want, you're thinking of recreational activities that are going to create noise.
Right. So like recreation, now you're talking a whole different thing. This is, this was intended to be a small setting like we were talking about. Restaurants, medical, maybe tutoring, whatever. When you start talking recreation, it's a whole different ballgame. And we live back there. It's unfair. Besides the parking scenario, that's almost the least of my worry compared to trying to sleep at night, cars pulling in, headlights. All my bedrooms face the back. And, the buffer, I have issues with that. So I'm gonna see all these cars. There's the berm is higher than my fence. So when you have trees on the berm that's higher than your fence, you see right through. And we actually had people that were walking on the berm. I know this is a different subject, but how do you get people that go outside to smoke? Are they gonna climb the berm and be looking into my yard? I don't know. But the noise level, the time that we're talking about of day, we're not talking about daytime things or things that reasonably close 10, 11 o'clock. It's not the place for it.
I recall you, when the original, and had nothing to do with this gentleman, you came before the board when it was
Yes.
first brought up, you spoke against the build.
Mm-hmm.
You later on came back and you spoke on behalf of the build.
Yes, I did.
After there was
Yes.
mediation of.
With Bill Bolton
Yep,
when he was
yep.
originally.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong so the board understands. There's Route 34, there's an entranceway, there would be these buildings, there are two buildings in
Mhm.
front. Behind that goes into the apartment areas, correct? And there are parking in front of those parking areas, right? In front of the buildings for the parking, for the apartments.
So the apartments are further down.
Yeah.
And then the two storefronts are up.
I know, I understand that, but are they not in between your house and those buildings?
One storefront's directly in front of my house.
There's
The
nothing in
building is-
between those apartment buildings, because you're on the lower end of Sheila, is that what you're saying?
Right, I'm for Sheila, so I'm the second house.
Right.
So the first house, it's just the trees over there. Then I'm by the water retention and the first building that's not built yet.
Okay. So there is no separation for, the rest of Sheila Court goes up and it's,
And then you have my neighbor
Yeah,
where it's partial building.
Right,
And then the
right, okay.
second set of storefronts.
but that's not the case with you. There's nothing in between except that the berm and the water, stormwater
And then it'll be
management.
the storefront that's not there yet.
Right.
That'll be that building.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
try and
yeah,
recollect where
yes,
you live.
yes.
Okay.
So that's really all I have to say, but I really urge you guys to really think about this because it's kind of unfair to put something like this in our backyard.
All right, well, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments to the board. Yes, ma'am, come forward.
Ma'am, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board?
I do.
Can we have your name, ma'am?
Melissa Takis Wong. I am located at
I'm going to have, go ahead. Your last name?
ACS-WOUNG.
Can you go a little slower for me? ACK?
TAK-WOUNG.
Okay.
I live,
First name, ma'am?
Melissa, Melisa.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, good evening. I live and reside next to Teal at 6 Sheila Court. And we have been there almost 16 years. We paid $750,000 for our home. Our homes are now valued over $1 million. Each and every owner has put in over $250,000 to their home. I am also a licensed real estate agent in the state of New Jersey for approximately 30 years. We do care about the value of our property, as each and every one of you should. And we have serious concern that we would like to see something nice be there and see NOAA successful. That's why, we did turn and say okay to certain things when the plans were initially proposed with Bill Bolton. But during this journey, we've been having issues. And our concern is, yes, I understand you need proper parking, which makes a lot of sense. But we also live there every day. So we experience things maybe each and every one of you would not. Being simply trying to turn left onto 34. It is very difficult, and you have to give it a try from Sheila Court left onto 34. It's not easy. So we're not sure with the proposal of the changes to increasing for recreation, how that is going to impact us when we're trying to live our life. Obviously, we don't want something that runs all hours of the night. We would like to see something that would be beneficial to everybody. And we're not really happy with the way things are going because we've had a lot of issues with the construction, things and damage to our property that have not yet been resolved. None of you have seen them. We have many issues that need to be resolved with NOAA. We are concerned because we cannot resolve these issues with NOAA as of yet. And there's talk that there will be, but nothing ever happens. We feel that once you vote on this, and 5 years, as you say, go by, we are stuck with a problem forever, and the value of our property and things like that. The lights are very bright in the back. I notice no one's mentioned anything about that, but we're hoping that there would be some sort of adjustment to that. We do have people that walk on the berm. It is a little shocking because they're just so high and they're like walking on the height of your fence. So if there's a recreational, we are not agreement with it because hatchet throwing has been thrown around here tonight. And if you think about it, a lot of them are BYOB. Okay, the last thing we needed is a bunch of people drunk, afterwards loud and beep, beep, getting into their car all hours of the night. So we were looking for the right to quiet enjoyment of our properties as well as taxpayers in this town. And we are hoping that whatever is going to take place, that this board consider the residents not just for parking spaces, in the whole aspect of if you were living behind that property. So we would like to see, like the medical, that we had no issues with that whatsoever. But we're just worried about noise at night. As you know from previous proposals, that's been our issue all along. And that's all I have.
I would just ask you the same thing. What is in between the rear of your home and the property they're speaking about? I'm saying there's a berm, correct, and a fence.
Exactly. So what we have is very interesting. So this is Teal. She comes closer to the retention basin and the building number 1 on the left. I sit directly behind a berm, which is there. And then direct behind me is all the parking here that, as I assume, is for the apartment complex that you've proposed. And I believe there's some parking on this side as well. So we're concerned that the overflow will come into this parking area here, okay? And this is 45 feet from my fence. Originally, we had planned on it being much further. This was before you. And somehow along the way, we couldn't make one meeting, and this got moved closer to our property when the setback was actually 50 feet. So we're not really happy with that, but it's nothing to do with you. That all happened prior. So I am literally right here. We have one berm. We have a couple of trees. The majority of them are dead, which is very sad. And we can see straight through. We can see the street lights coming through the trees. We have photos of all that. It's just, we thought that we weren't going to see all that because that's not how it was originally proposed to us in the beginning.
The apartment building is not.
The apartment
between
building
you.
is not directly behind me, but you will be hearing from Tom, who it's directly behind.
Behind them.
Yes, so he'll be speaking as well.
Okay.
So we just want you to please take us into consideration. We are trying to be good neighbors, and right now, it's not going that way for us with Mr. Friedman.
All right, we thank you for your comments. So noted.
Second, you mentioned about some other issues, right? Other than just that?
Yeah, I have. So we've, during the course of the construction, obviously, Mr. Friedman is not the person doing the physical construction, but the workers there have had numerous occasions of crazy things. We've had dirt piles that looked like Escape to Witch Mountain, if you've ever seen that movie. That had mud had flooded onto Route 34. The township came out and they got in trouble for that. Then the workers decided to build a dam so the water and mud didn't flow through the retention basin out to 34. And when they built the dam and the storm came, the mud came with the water, flooded between me and Teal onto Sheila Court, through underneath my pool, all the way down to Tom into his pool that looked like a complete cesspool. That's one of the issues. The other issues are, for some reason, they had a tremendous difficulty with the berm, of watering of the berm of the trees, and they had put a drainage trench, which we greatly appreciated and wanted that from the get-go, but I think it was malfunctioning. They had to come and redig up the drainage trench that goes to the retention basin, and the workers would leave the water running for days, but there was something wrong, and Teal and I got flooded. I had flooded 80 feet by 30 feet numerous times over and over and over again. I know they don't believe us. We did file police reports. No resolution has come to it. We do have erosion from it. You can see some of my sprinkler lines. It's crazy. It's like, this is nonsense. Underneath my pool from all the water flowing, I have an above-ground pool, so the sand has actually moved where I have divots in it, and I have to take off the liner, put the sand back, put 10,000 gallons water back. I have to replace the liner. That's $2,500. The erosion is almost $2,000. The workers' backhoe had hit my fence twice. Once I have a full video of it while I was in the pool. I was able to pop that back in myself. And the other one, I cannot. It's bent. I have photos of it here. It's damaged, and no one wants to help me or fix this, okay? Lastly, for me, is the most recent episode, which is completely disturbing. Monday, May 1st, my favorite tree in the whole world, which is a deciduous pine tree, 45 feet tall, by approximately 25 feet wide, came down after sustaining multiple hurricanes. It was my only buffer of looking at the 3-story apartment building, 48 feet tall, came down into my yard, taking out my fence. And when I went over there, freaking out, of course, and Tom at house number 8, we discovered that the main arm of the tree, excuse me, I'm not technical, was severed, and the fence was put 2 inches away, so you can see it's a clean cut. And then the roots on the back side of the tree were dead, and that's the end that all came up and rolled that way. So I got upset. I called the township. I said, you know what? I'm disturbed. This tree has been here all this time. It doesn't look right. The right side, you can see the roots are green. It smells like pine. The other is just dead as a doornail. And Gary, the arborist, I can't think of his last name, begins with an L, came out
Lavallo.
and wrote a whole report in here that the roots of the tree were damaged by the workers, that the root was severed to put a fence, and I still have the tree. So I had to file an insurance claim, which is my second, which hopefully I'm still gonna have insurance for my homeowners, with a $1,500 deductible to get rid of the tree that's not even my tree to begin with. So, because we haven't resolved these things with Mr. Freeman, we feel scared and concerned that once this is done, we're going to be left high and dry with craziness and God knows what. And that's why we beg you to have us in consideration for exactly what we are experiencing through this. I'm sure Mr. Freeman wouldn't like if I came to his house and I did all this damage to his home. He would be angry. His family would be angry. Nobody would be happy. So we just want the right to quiet enjoyment. We want to be friendly and peaceful, but we're just not getting that right now.
Understood. Are you in civil litigation right now with the property?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Nope. I tried to work it out with him privately, and he said he would, and that was it.
Yeah, we're not,
So, that's all.
that's a plan. It's, yeah.
Oh.
You want to see the plan? That's not her. Oh,
She had something different.
we're not accepting, no, I can't
Nope.
accept that. That I can't do.
Yep.
All right, well,
That
thank you
should
for your
answer
comments.
question. Thank you.
Could we have a moment to respond?
Go ahead, absolutely.
Without going one by one.
that green?
It's on.
You have to push the
It's
button.
on. It's on.
Okay.
Without going one by one, I'm not denying what my neighbor has gone through, and she has texted me, and she's put this through. The most recent episode with the tree, I emailed a couple of times with updates of where I was with that. I don't know that that was my responsibility. I know that the arborist came out. Having said that, instead of me hiring someone, it will cost me the same amount of money to get rid of the tree. I did mention in an email a couple of days ago that we are getting just quotes by next week. That tree should be out. We also will, if we can figure out the fencing to make sure that the fencing is correct, is the right fencing for that, and we can pick that up easily. We will also repair that.
We're not going to have a debate.
I don't think I'm just responding back.
No, I didn't
There
mean you,
are-
sir. I was just speaking to the woman.
Okay, the other, so that I have responded back, again, regardless of whose fault it was, I think that this is something I'm, okay, it wasn't on the tree wasn't on my property, but the arborist came out and said that because of when we were digging that trench that was requested of me, that I paid an extra $50,000 to do and put in, which we did to try to alleviate some of the flooding issues that did happen because 2 years ago there was enormous amount of rain over a 1 week period. I think the number was like 25 inches, and that's when this all happened. This didn't happen because we flooded on purpose. This happened because 2 years ago in June, actually around this time, it was just an absolute nightmare with the amount of rain that came through. So we actually put another 50,000 pipe, which wasn't on the original plans, in order for the tenants to not get flooded. Without getting into the details, I just don't want it to seem like I'm not doing anything. There are other issues that are outstanding that I'm going to work with the tenants on. I have already addressed some of those issues, fencing for one of the neighbors. I think it was Tom, who I think is here tonight, as well as putting up a basketball court that we had to take down in order to be able to do the construction. So I'm not absent, but there are issues that go on a day-to-day basis. So I don't want this board to think that I'm not doing anything. They have my numbers. Sometimes they don't get the responses they like from me, but I'm not absent and not responding at all. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, the board doesn't want to get into a debate over these issues. It's not really in our jurisdiction or our purview to do so. I will allow the next person to come up. I think, was that you, sir? No? Oh, okay. Anybody else? Oh, the gentleman in the back, okay. Board Attorney will swear you in, sir.
Do you swear affirm to testify truth in this matter before the board, sir?
Yes.
Can you have your name, sir?
Tom Sequeira, Sequueira.
And your address?
8 Sheila Court.
Thank you, sir.
I do live directly behind the apartments. Literally,
Okay.
I could throw a rock and probably break a window. The tree that fell down was the one on my property in the corner. And looked like the arborist was there. I talked to him. He said it looked like when they trenched it, it looks like they cut the roots and it literally just fell. I have spoken to Noah a couple of times. I don't have many issues. My biggest issue is I figured if I reach out to him, he gets back to me. The lighting, the trees is big for me because I see everything. Everybody sees into my backyard. For the past 3 years, I've had a summer outside because Monday through Saturday, there's construction going on. So I'm hoping that this year, since the apartments are almost done, that it'll be a nice quiet summer and I can actually enjoy the pool. The parking lot lights, Melissa did mention, they are bright. Most of the bedrooms face the back. My bathroom window, at one point, I don't know if it was done on the spite, every single light on the apartments were on. Every single light. It would shine in. Now it's better. They've turned off most of the lighting. There's only 2 or 3 lights. But I would like more trees. Obviously, all the trees that are there are dead. The parking lot lights, if they had like the shades that blew them down. I mean, our lights on our street are amber lights. These things are like bright white football stadium lights. And the parking for anything future, whatever goes in those buildings, the idea is great with the percentage and limiting how many timing of restaurants or recreational, whatever it is. I just don't want to see parking on our street's tight as it is. You can't sometimes we have trouble going 2 cars down that street, let alone having other people park there. I think that's pretty much it.
That's understandable. The apartments are not finished, right?
From the looks of it, they're pretty much done. I mean, he started putting up.
Right, I see them, that they look like they're finished,
They look
but
like they're finished. I mean, the noise and the vibrations, all that stuff's pretty much over for now until they start building those.
let me ask a question to the professionals. Won't there be an inspection prior to any occupancy there? And if that lighting, Mr. Dargy, isn't correct,
Yes.
that has to be corrected?
Yes.
It's just bright. Nobody really knows unless they're on it's just bright. It's like the parking lot lights are like a restaurant,
Yeah, I'm just highlighting that
Yeah.
all of that has to
I figured
fall in line.
Even the dead trees eventually have to be addressed. He wouldn't be
Yes.
able to get his bond unless the trees are alive.
Yeah.
I mean, that I know.
Yeah.
From,
So-
yeah.
So
Go ahead.
I know that a lot of residents have concerns about the trees and the dead trees too. I just want them to know, because this morning we did have a conversation about it with the assistant township engineer. And so before the bond release, the engineering office goes and does an inspection. So any trees or anything that is dead would have to be replaced before the bond is released. And the engineering office does go and inspect the site. So those concerns will not go unnoticed. They will be addressed prior to any release of bonds.
My only other thing, like on the original plans, they look like it was double row, or double stack. It's just like one row. I mean, that's going to take a long time for anything to any kind of coverage. I mean, the building itself is built up high, like it is on the top of the fence line. So the trees barely cover the first apartment building. And then, I have 2 others that everything looks in. I mean, you get used to it, but nobody's there. So it'll be interesting when people are there and they're smoking out in the balcony or whatnot, and you're sitting there in the pool and everybody's watching you. 36 apartments, But it is what it is. It's done, but I would just like other thing, more of a buffer. The trees, for one, are great, and that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And they will have to be compliant with the resolution upon inspection. And I'm certain that the applicant's attorney would agree with me on that.
Yes, yeah, I think that the comments that I'm hearing sound like the valid ones that were probably heard the first time around, and then the site was designed, and the site will have to be built the way it was designed. I think they're unrelated to what this forum is, but it's the public portion. They have the absolute right to, to speak and bring those concerns to the board.
Let me just see, is anybody else going to speak tonight on this matter? Last time, because I'm going to close the public portion. We're getting near the closing hour tonight. Go ahead, so the board attorney will swear you in.
Do you swear to testify truth in this matter for the board, sir?
Yeah, I do.
And can we have your name, please?
Pratik, Pratik.
And your last name?
Pandya, Pandya. Pandya.
Okay.
I'm very much agree with 534 Route 34. Matt Wan. I'm living besides this commercial thing. Besides means left side of this.
Just speaking in the mic.
Yeah, I'm living besides commercial place, and I'm agree with all of this. Please consider this request. Don't go with recreational thing. That's all I
Are
would.
you the house that's right next to the driveway to the, it's actually,
Left side of the.
yeah, well, as you look at the property, it's to the right, is it not?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so it's a little to the west.
Yeah, west side.
Even though that's a north and south highway?
Yeah,
Okay. And your entrance is off the
Yeah,
road?
on
I got you.
route.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
Route 35.
right, so you speak against the recreational part
Yes,
of that?
yes. Only one thing.
And what's the proximity of you to the other building that would be going in?
That I don't know, but maybe 100 meters, 100, 200.
It's probably
100
100 feet or
meters.
so. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you, sir. All right, now I'm going to close the public portion on this matter.
So I could just,
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say, Vina made a comment before. Mr. Higgins, could you just put a little testimony on with regard to the recreation component of it? And the positive and negative criteria? Because I guess that was.
So I asked that because, like I said in the beginning, I did review the other uses that are permitted in the EDO1 zone. The recreational use was something that came last minute. It was entertainment and then recreational. I would like Jim to put in some testimony on record, especially because of it being an R30 zone.
Well, one thing with with recreational uses is you don't know what hours, depending upon the recreational use, it's going to be different hours of the day, different days of the week. It might be more weekends during the day than weeknights. It depends upon what the specific recreational use is. And it might be the board might want to consider having a recreational uses limited in terms of the hours of operation at night, so that you wouldn't have the issues of people coming out later at night and disrupting the neighborhood. I don't think it's really going to happen that often. I would think if these activities are at night, they're going to park in front of the building, not behind the building, because you're not going to have it at that hour, you're not going to have the parking lot full and people having to go behind the building. Most people would come to the front of the building. And the activities, again, would be inside the building, so you wouldn't have a lot of noise that would be associated with them. But,
Jim, if you just mentioned that, so these are all indoor activities.
That's correct.
And you're aware that the Township of Old Bridge has ordinances in place with regard to the number of decibels and sound ordinances that could come off the site?
That's correct. The township and the state have ordinances to that effect.
And those would be policing issues that would have to be policed either by the police or the zoning department.
Yes, it would.
And if
but-
the applicant, say, agreed that recreational uses would be closed at 10 o'clock,
Yeah.
does that bolster your opinion as to?
Absolutely. I was thinking 10 o'clock myself as far as a limit.
Because that's something that we would be willing to do, is to agree that recreational uses be closed by 10 PM.
I think it's important to understand, too, that everything will be with recreational uses will be inside the building, so people aren't going to be outside the building throwing axes. That's all internal, and that noise won't come out of the building.
And if that use in particular is of particular concern to the board, from what you've heard from the members of the public, if you want to eliminate axe throwing as a potential use, then we would welcome that condition as well, if the board felt that that was necessary.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one, since we're on the topic of restricting the recreational use, the site plan has both buildings with an outdoor retail area that's noted on the plans. So there will be no recreational use of that area then?
No.
Yeah, all the recreation would be inside.
So
One of the problems with all of that is it sounds good, but in reality, it doesn't work that way, because the noise does emanate. Right now, they're shooting in the basement here in the gun range, and we can hear it here. So there's no baffling, there's no muffling of the sound. I don't think that the build was anything special where everything was going to be soundproofed, and it's going to be glass fronts. So that noise will escape, any loud noises, and it will go across the property line.
As far as recreational uses, I mean, obviously, if you have gun and shooting or shooting range, there's going to be a lot of noise, and that's going to emanate outside the building. But I can't think of any other recreational uses that would have that kind of noise associated with it that would emanate outside the building. Even the axe throwing, but the applicants have agreed not to have that.
Yeah, I've never went in to look at the other axe throwing and what kind of noise it generates into a parking lot, but
Like the.
I don't know.
The video golf, you're not going to have noise.
Yeah, I don't think that
associated
would
with
be a
that.
problem,
That's-
but, it's
yes.
hitting a ball into a screen, yeah.
Yes. No, I understand what you're saying. You can't legislate everything.
No.
There's no question about that.
And I think that's part of the reason that I bring up the police powers, that the board is limited as to what they can regulate, and then you have to leave it up to the other ordinances that are out there. But if that particularly appears to be a particularly noisy event that's of great concern, that's something we're willing to take off the table. And also keep in mind that all the front entrances to all of these buildings do point out to Route 34. There's only the emergency exits that are in the rear.
Chairman.
Yeah, I just don't want to pass the buck to the policing agency because that doesn't work. It never has. I worked in law enforcement for my entire career. Noise metering is done by the county health department now. So all you do is kick the can down the road because one person calls, it's too noisy, they roll up, I don't hear anything, they leave, somebody else calls again, they come back. It's really not an issue that they want to take care of. They may be responsible to take care of, but it's a very difficult issue to enforce. So I would rather that matter be settled here by us versus now pushing it to another department in the township for enforcement purposes. Ms. Sawant.
So, Chairman, the one concern, and that has, I did discuss that with Mr. Clauser before too. See, when I look at other recreational uses, not just within Old Bridge, even outside, whether it's Edison or any other place, right? These recreational type of uses are mostly part of a strip mall kind of a development or a shopping center type of a development. I have not seen a recreational type of a use within a mixed use setup. And here we are talking about a use variance on a residential property. When we have approved those type of uses in the past, they have been in commercial zones. So the burden of the proofs is much less when you're trying to justify a use variance where you are in EDO 1 zone versus when the property is within a residential zone and is surrounded. And I was actually looking at the aerial too. This property, if you look on the opposite side, it's all residential. Single-family homes or townhouses. On the other side, it's all single-family home. In that stretch, it's all residential use. We do have an axe throwing place right around the corner from this site. So it's not like we don't have recreational uses. We definitely didn't have issues with personal services, retail, sale, and services. But this is, and there's so much ambiguity on what type of recreational use will go in, how much parking, what will be the peak times. There is so much uncertainty, and that's my concern.
I don't know the fix for it. I don't know that you want the board to take a vote now on something now that's even vague, that the owner's going to, not the owner, but the applicant is going to get to decide, I might have to move this. And I also feel for the business part of the build, that we don't want places vacant, but at the same time, they have to coexist with not only the apartment dwellers that will be there, but the property owners that I guess are not as far away as I thought. I'd like to go, and I'm going to plan on going to take a look at this, and I would suggest that perhaps you don't take a vote tonight.
Okay.
I'd like to go and visit it myself. I might encourage others to go. We're not going to be walking into anybody's yards, by the way. We can view from the street and just drive by. But I'd like to see the distance myself.
Okay, so.
If that's okay with you. I think it might be in the best interest of everyone.
Yeah, so to consider that and give some advice, can I know what a possible date would be of when we would return?
Next possible date, we could. I have no problem with that. You're not going to present any more testimony.
August 3rd.
What was that?
August 3rd, the same date that we
August
have
3rd?
given.
Could I have 1 second?
Yeah,
Mr.
sure.
Chair? I know we're at the witching hour.
Yeah.
Just have a minute.
Sorry, I see you raising your hand. Unfortunately, we closed the public portion. We should not be having a discussion on the dais right now about the matter. If you're talking about baseball. Okay. Please understand, we're still live on the TV. We're still live and on the record.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Here's my 2 scenarios. One, if we just took the recreational component off the table and just asked for the uses that are permitted in the EDO 1 zone, knowing that, I'm not saying they're prohibited, that if I wanted to have that analyzed and come back and file a use variance application just for recreational uses, would the board consider voting on just allowing the EDO 1 uses this evening? And if not, then we'd have to come back August 3rd and keep the application the way it's going. It sounds to me like the recreational uses or component of it was what causing the trouble. But if not, if you tell me that's not what's causing the trouble, then I'll wait until August 3rd.
I would just say that I think it's, in my personal opinion, to your personal opinion, I think you should probably wait until come back.
And that's
and
what we're gonna
take
do.
the
We're
vote.
gonna- we're
I'd
gonna-
like to be fair to not only the applicant, but I'd like to be fair to the residents.
We're going to,
And I think that might give us enough time to just take a look and see what's
Got it.
going on. All right, just my opinion.
and I'm going to follow it.
Okay.
I have for 18 years.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you.
So then we'll carry it. I would ask without any further notice or publication to August 3rd. I think that was the date that we.
That is August 3rd? All right, this matter will be continued. This is the 31-22Z, located 538 Route 34. This matter will be continued August 3rd. No further notification. If you're interested in this matter, please show up on that date or tune in. Mr. Clauser, thank you and your experts.
Thanks for your time and your indulgence this evening. I appreciate it.
That ends the business before the board this evening. We have general public comments. There's only one person left in here. Sir, were you going to speak before the board? No? Okay. Anyone else want to speak before the board? Not on this matter, but it's just general public comments. I see none. I'll close that portion as well. Natalie, next meeting is?
June 15th, and that will be over Zoom.
June 15th, Zoom, right? Okay. Anything that the township wants to say? No? Thank you, Mr. Dasty and the township professionals.
Thank you.
We'll meet again on June what, 15th?
June 15th.
15th.
Via Zoom.
All right. Someone want to move for an adjournment? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? We stand adjourned.